Good evening, everybody. It is 7:32 p.m. I'm going to bring the meeting of the Willington Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Present are commissioners Doug Roberts, Andy Marco, Joe Hall, and myself, Vice Chair John Tehan. Four of us being here constitutes a quorum, so we will begin. Item 1 on the agenda. PZ 22-18 text amendment pertaining to modifications of 5.05.01.02.24 and table 8.02 for dimensional requirements.
So this is
Hi, Bob.
this is just for receipt. It came in and it's a text amendment, so it's got to be referred to CROG. So we will schedule a public hearing for the November meeting. So that's all you need to do tonight. Just wanting to put it on the agenda so people can see that it's coming.
Okay, just a note for the recording. Bob Shabbat is also here. Okay, public hearing PZ 22-16 application for construction of a new commercial building and solar array at 0 Ruby Road.
Good evening, Keith Parent, professional engineer with CHA representing the applicant. I'm here with Phil Thompson, the applicant, and Ralph Hollis, the property owner. So for anyone who's not familiar, the proposed property is just next door to the TA travel stop and the off ramps from I-84. It's that undeveloped little triangular shaped piece. Parcel has apparently been disturbed in the past. Kind of has the appearance that it was used as some sort of borrow pit for one of the construction projects, either for 84 or one of the other roadway projects previously. So we've got this one little wetland area on site that the scientists seem to generally agree is an excavated wetland. It's not a natural wetland. It's just something that they happen to excavate below the water table there. The proposal is to develop a commercial building here, either be a restaurant, quick serve, that sort of thing, in the parking area. And then the remainder of the site will be covered with solar array. That solar array will also be associated with a couple of EV charging stations. So we've submitted to DOT. We just got comments back on our driveway entrance here yesterday. They had a couple minor things. They want us to adjust some grading and that sort of thing. And there's an old easement through here that they just wanted a little bit more information on. So we'll get that addressed. And then we also need to go before your Wetlands Commission. I believe that meeting's in a couple of weeks here, 2 weeks, to get approval for the work around that excavated wetland. All the stormwater from the parking lot and the roof will be collected by a series of catch basins, discharged through a hydrodynamic separator unit, and then discharged into a small water quality basin here. All the flow off the site goes through an existing swale that discharges into the state DOT system. As you folks probably know, there's no municipal sewer in this area, so we are proposing an on-site septic system here. That's with Eastern Highlands for review as well. And then we'll also need a public water system. So 2 wells proposed at the edge of the parking area here to provide water service to the building. And we'll be pulling in electric, telephone, and communication from the pole right there on the side of the road. It's pretty straightforward. If you folks have any questions, concerns, comments, certainly we'd like to discuss them.
Will the building be all electric utilities? Or are you going to use any propane or heating oil, anything like that?
I believe it would be all electric.
Yeah, all electric heat pumps.
Great.
Yeah.
I don't have any other questions. Does the committee members have any other questions? We have a hand up? No, it's just someone joining. Joe, online for the applicant.
Questions here?
I'm guessing no. This will have to be kept open because, like you said, with the wetlands, and there's a couple of other things that you need to take care of, but any member of the public care to comment on this? Yes, Todd.
Todd Bissonette, 45 Cosgrove Road. It's a nice presentation that you put out, very transparent. It looks like something that really the town would benefit by having businesses like that to come to it. Nice job.
Anyone else?
The line of sight on the north end of the property where you get to the 84 off ramp.
Yep.
Something be done to improve the line of sight? There's a dirt pile behind the utility pole.
I can speak to that. Ralph Chillis, 47 Village Hill Road. Myself and my siblings own this piece of property. I had talked with the DOT some time ago about grading between the fence line and the exit ramp, basically trying to level that. I tried to do it. They wouldn't permit it. They won't allow anything like that until the town gives their blessing to some sort of business activity. And then, you know, the rights of way people could be approached about doing some grading there. Down the exit ramp that goes, I think is just plow and of course the cost on the applicant. I tried it, like I said, I tried to do it because it would have made sense. It would have enhanced TA's property because it would have offered more visibility. This will help some, but only on the Ruby Road side, the way their grading currently is.
Right, yeah, so, you know, as part of this project, we're grading in that right away area here and flattening that whole area to obtain, you know, the sightlines we need from our driveway. But, you know, this corner is owned by DOT, so any work there would have to be proposed to them, they can approve it.
Okay,
But then, again, they won't consider it until,
Right,
there's something in it. Okay,
which was the challenge for me because I had no plans other than trying to market the property.
okay.
But the sightline, certainly on the corner there, that hummock where the.
Yeah, I don't think it would
Utility
take
pole
much. It
is.
would make a big improvement.
It would certainly enhance both properties, actually, if
Yeah.
that could be graded, at least for some distance down the ramp.
Yes, Bob.
So I have a question. Yes. So the solar arrays, are they stationary or are they tracking? I believe.
There's stationary ground mount.
Yeah, okay,
Units, so your
Yeah.
standard ground mount solar.
okay.
They will be positioned south facing,
Mhm, yeah.
but we don't have plans to have what are called optimizers on them
Right, yeah.
that rotate the solar like that.
Mhm.
Given we're kind of working with a blank slate and can face directly south facing,
Right.
we don't have a need to have motorized
Yeah.
tilt.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask. Thanks.
That's a lot of panels for a tracker.
Yeah,
You put in a lot of trackers.
that would increase the cost quite a bit. But it is a nice site for solar.
Some history on the parcel that might be helpful. This, of course, was part of my grandfather's farm until Wilbur Parkway was, right away was established. And it went right through the middle. So this is one of the orphan parcels as a result of all the DOT work over the years. Originally, it was a borrow pit from my father because my father sold a lot of gravel. He had one borrow pit here on Ruby Road. There was another one directly opposite the bridge on the northwest side of the highway, which is currently on the market by Crossan, I think. And Joe Mahayak did a number on that piece of property. We won't go there. So it was a borrow pit, both for my father and I think the Ruby family originally. There was a little fight over the property line between Ruby and my father. So it's high water table in the spring. And it drops off very quickly. The groundwater level drops off very quickly as things warm up. So I think as far as the wetlands, I don't think wetlands is going to have an issue with it. I did speak to it at the last wetlands meeting. But obviously they've got to dot the i's across the t's. So,
How much power do you think you'll be generating?
About 900,000 kilowatt hours. Also worth noting, we already have interconnection approval and solar program acceptance from Eversource for the property. That's great.
If nobody else has any questions, we'll keep this one open until your wetlands is completed. And I guess we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on, item 3 on the agenda, PZ 22-17, special permit application for cannabis retail establishment at 11 Phelps Way.
Thank you so much for the permission for hearing us today. My name is Patrick Johnson. I'm here on behalf of Nutmeg Willington JV LLC. It's a joint venture with an existing operator partnering with a social equity applicant. Which
Can you talk
means,
a little louder?
sorry. I'm here on behalf of Nutmeg Willington JV LLC. It's a joint venture with a social equity applicant partnering with an existing operator. What that means is we do not have to participate in the lottery. It doesn't mean we're guaranteed a license from the state, assuming we pass background checks and we submit all the applications as needed. Just a quick note on myself, I've been in the cannabis industry for 10 years. I've helped set up a lot of adult use operations in the Northeast. I left the large multi-state operator where I oversaw 7 states, including Connecticut. So I've got a lot of experience in this. I am partnering and helping out our social equity applicants get stood up in a right way. So we have the experience to do this in a kind of a compliant way. The site we're looking at is 11 Phelps Way. It is also known as Phelps Crossing. It's a zone as a design commercial zone, so DC. It's currently, we're looking to take the 2 units at the end of that plaza. It was I guess previously used as a dance studio and as a bank. We're looking to combine those 2 into one spot, about 3,100 square feet. We're not proposing to do any changes to the outside. All the changes we're looking to do is inside, including combining the 2 units into one space. We're proposing people kind of enter through the dance studio entrance, which is on the left, kind of traverse inside once we've checked our IDs. Once again, it's adult use, so 21 plus only, and then coming out the bank side. Let's see. We've looked at the regulations from a local point of view. We believe we comply with all the regulations. We've worked with the town on kind of ensuring that we meet the requirements from a buffer perspective. There is a 500-foot buffer needed for any school and church. There's a 1,000-foot buffer for any similar use. We believe we're going to be the first one, so the 1,000-foot buffer probably doesn't apply in this situation. But as far as the 500-foot buffer goes, closest church is 1.4 miles away. There's a couple of churches right around 1.5 miles away. There is a daycare, I know we confirmed with the town, that's 600 feet and change away. So that kind of is beyond the buffer. There's plenty of parking on the site. I know per the regulations, we're required to have 21 parking spots. The entire plaza is 158 parking spots, 9 handicap spots. So we believe we're going to have more than enough parking to kind of meet our customers. Obviously, we're not going to be looking to use half of those parking spots, but you know, suffice to say that we believe we're going to have plenty of parking to meet those requirements. As far as hours of operations go, we plan on adhering to the town regulations. I believe it's 8 to 9. We consistently in all our locations in the state of Connecticut, we're hoping to be open Monday through Saturday, 9 to 8, on Sundays 10 to 5, and open about 360 days a year. With a couple of days, major holidays, we would not be open. kind of stating some of the kind of per the regulations. Obviously, there's no consumption on the site, there's no consumption in the parking lot. We're gonna have a security guard that's gonna make sure that none of that happens. All that, obviously, nobody inside, once again, it's adult use only, so nobody's who's not 21 or older will be allowed onto the site. There's not gonna be any odor. Once again, this is a retail site only, so everything in the store is gonna be packaged. You're not gonna smell anything. It's not a cultivation site. We'll obviously comply with all the security regulations. This is a highly secure site. If you look at the regulations for security, it's pretty thick. There's probably going to be 50+ cameras inside. Every inch of the building is going to be covered inside, outside. As far as signage goes, we are looking to come back and present our signage package at a later date. We will make sure it obviously complies. Yeah, we did reach out to the local police. I know we work with the Troop C State Police. It's about 1.6 miles away. We like when the police is close, not that we would ever need them. I've been in the business, like I said, for 10 years. I don't think we've ever had the police needed to be showing up at our site, but it's good to have them there. It's probably used as a deterrent, to be quite honest. We plan on working with both fire and police. We do that in all our locations. We submit call trees, so they know who to call if ever there's a problem. Obviously, the town that had that too, you'll have the phone numbers of our store manager, myself, a gentleman over there, Dave Bernier, born and raised in Connecticut. He ran all of retail for Curaleaf, one of the largest operations. He oversaw their retail in Maine, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. So he's been in the retail business for 30+ years in Connecticut. Most of his career. So obviously he's going to be kind of helping overseeing our partners as well. So like I said, I think we got a very good team. I think the site is great. It's a good spot, plenty of parking. Like I said, I think we will benefit the fellow tenants in this plaza. We are going to drive some traffic to that site. We've gotten letters of support, I believe, from everyone in the plaza, or obviously not the USPS. I think that one is maybe the only one who has not submitted a letter. I don't even know if we asked, to be honest. But most of the other tenants, the hardware store, the pizza shop, they're all in support of this. So we don't believe there's going to be any issues from our kind of tenants in the plaza. Yeah, so I mean, I think, like I said, I think we've demonstrated that this site does comply with the local regulations. As I mentioned, I believe we have a very good team that's been doing this. We hope to have our provisional license from the state fairly soon. We're going through some background checks. We just got a provisional approval last week. So we are kind of moving forward with the paperwork from the state. And I guess if all goes well here and with our build out and permits, I hope it opens sometime in Q1. It's going to be a fairly, I think, straightforward build. It's a great looking building. I think most of the work will probably try to be moving the large vaults in the bank and things like that. That tends to be a bit of a project, but
Not gonna keep the ball for all the money.
it's fine. It's fine. A lot of people say I'm perfect involved, but I mean, it's obviously not. It's not quite the same, but it tend not to be there. Like you mentioned.
Not big enough.
Well, not even that, but,
I wish.
obviously, and it does, you bring up a good point. I mean, I think there is obviously some benefit to the town. There's a 3% tax that goes back to the town. And we do tend to, or at least in all my prior engagements, and we plan to do the same, and get very involved with local community, charities and kind of help do fundraisers and things like that. We want to be involved with the community. We do that everywhere we go. That's something I took a lot of pride in my prior life before I left the big MSO. So that's something I carry with me as far as mentorships and all those things go. But we hope this is you view it as being a good site as well for the town. We do like the fact it's kind of, like I said, we like the plaza. It's not kind of off in the corner. There is going to be kind of ongoing traffic there, which I think helps everybody involved. So with that said, we'd love to get the support from the town and obviously answer any questions you have. So
Do you have any kind of an estimate as far as what our anticipated tax revenue might be?
I don't know. Nobody really knows in the state. We don't know how many they're going to open up. I know initially we're going to cap it at cap it at 80, I believe. I think now there's talks about it being over 100. I know in a state like Massachusetts, I think right now the average dispensary in Massachusetts is right around $20,000 a day. Which it adds up. So if that's 7.2 million a year roughly, and the town gets 3% of that. So we're looking at a couple $100,000.
How many dispensaries in Massachusetts?
Right now in Massachusetts, last time I checked, there was about 245 adult and 48 medical. Be perfectly honest, when Massachusetts started, revenue was quite a bit higher, right? But obviously Massachusetts pulled a lot of customers from Vermont, which just got approved, from Connecticut, which they're not going to do anymore. So obviously we got, and New York as well. But I think at the end of last year, Massachusetts had 198 dispensaries. The average ticket was about 30,000, and that went down since then. I think that at 204 dispensaries, it was just over 20,000 in Q1, and I think at end of Q2 was 250 dispensaries. It was now below 20,000. So we ballpark 20,000. I don't know if that's, it kind of depends what happens to the rest of the state, to be honest. I think it's an interesting, and to be perfectly honest, we are trying to kind of maximize the footprint as many as we can. We're hoping to open up 8 dispensaries as part of this joint venture. That is something we have the ability to do, partnering with an MSO. We have to be 20 miles from each other. So I think that's a strategic benefit for us, because a lot of people are probably going to concentrate around Hartford and some of these other locations. We have to spread them out, and we found some great locations, including Willington. We just got Killingly approved last night from a special permit. So, they're all 20 miles apart, but we're going to target some of these areas that I don't think a lot of people might necessarily go to, as their first choice. And I think for us, it's a great benefit that we kind of have to spread out, and we found some great locations, including this one.
A lot of our residents have expressed misgivings about this, with crime being a big issue, saying that there would be crime around a retail cannabis establishment. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at studies, and I'm sure there's going to be studies telling opposite things, but majority of studies actually says that crime goes down, house prices go up when cannabis dispensary goes in, and as well as businesses in the same business plaza, they all tend to benefit from this. There's a lot of studies that says crime goes down, and a lot of it is, I think it's the additional, cameras, and just kind of the police tend to kind of patrol a little bit more in the area when there's something like this around. And I think we just met with when we met with Troop C, they said they're probably drive by 40, 50 times a day. So I mean, there's a lot of that as well. So I can honestly say in being in the industry 10 years, the only crime we had, I think we had a elderly woman with a baseball bat inside one of our stores, kind of broke some windows. She got mad at something. We've never had a break-in. We've never had anything. So it's I think it depends a little bit what area you're in. I think that's why we like this, the fact that it's not often an industrial park, right? It is kind of in the middle of, it's very lit up. It used to be a former bank. It's quite secure, especially where the vault's going to be. And like I said, we have motion sensors, vibration sensors for glass break. We have multiple cameras. Everything is RFID, so you can't get in everything electronic. Direct call trace into local police, everything. It's very, very secure. It's honestly more secure than a lot of the banks, and that's part of the regulations, right? Which I think is a big deterrent too. I think people realize that it's quite hard to get in there.
But after they purchase the product, then they come outside.
After they purchase the product, they come outside. Once again, they are not allowed. I mean, there's going to be a lot of education with this, but they're not allowed to consume on premises. So our guards make sure that nobody's going to linger in the car.
So then they come up and around the corner and they park outside on the road and light up or do whatever. And the grocery store that they had in here, the whole road was nothing but trash. I mean, it sounds like a great deal, but then the people who live there around us are confronted with all this other stuff.
I guess all I can say is we will deter people from consuming. We honestly, we can't control what store it is.
That's the enough to you. It bothers me.
I don't think you'll see a lot of people pulling over like 5 feet down the road and consume. I think they're gonna go home and consume it in the safety of the home. That is what is recommended. That's what the kind of, a lot of the laws pushing towards. That's not to say, you know, somebody, same thing, leaving a liquor store, you know, finishing their nips in the car. I
And
think,
they toss them out the window and we pick them up constantly.
yeah, like I said, I think that is, I don't think you'll see a lot of it, to be honest. Like I said, that's not something we can control, but I think majority of the people, that is not what they do. Vast majority. I think people go home, they want to enjoy it in front of the TV after dinner to help them sleep. That's what we're seeing. We have not, and like I said, I've done this for 10 years. That has not been anything, I can honestly, that's not been anything my team has heard after the fact where a neighbor calls up, I'm finding 15 different whatever in my yard. That doesn't, it just honestly does not happen.
I'm sorry, can we get your name and address too, please? Any member of the public that's going to speak needs to tell us.
Linda Howe,
Mhm.
and I'm 315 River Road.
Okay, for right now, I was hopeful that the commission could ask questions and then the public could ask questions afterwards. So I'd ask that you allow our commission to ask questions for now. Please don't speak up until I invite the public to speak. Okay, thank you. Do any other members of the commission wish to ask any questions?
I don't have any questions. I would just say that driving to take care of property up in Worcester over the 10 years, we've come to know where the various dispensaries are on Route 20 and I'll say one thing about all those facilities. They are cleaner than any business, a 7-Eleven or anything else. You don't see anything in the yard. You can't get in until the officer lets you in. You don't see cars parked anywhere but in the parking lot, and cars leave. I've never seen an incident. Granted, we're not there 24/7, but insofar as a business and the presentation of a business owner, I don't see anybody doing it better than the dispensaries do in Massachusetts. That's what I have to say. That's all.
I appreciate it. I mean, I started off in Massachusetts. I think one of the stores you passed is one of the ones I stood up, I think, but I think just anecdotally, but we had a store, my first store I ever launched was a medical store in Hanover, Massachusetts. Right? Our goal is for nobody who doesn't want cannabis should know that we're there, really. We don't want to make, like, we want to kind of think the people who are looking for us, we're there. Otherwise, nobody should notice driving by that there's something special going on. In the town of Hanover, we had a medical dispensary. 2 years later, we were talking to the town about adult use. They hands down didn't want adult use. But somebody on the commission, I think, said, we don't even want medical in our dispensary. And I had to think about it. I was like, we've been here for 2 years. No, like a lot of people did not even know that we've actually been operating in town for 2 years as a medical dispensary. So I mean, like, we want to do our own business. Like I said, if there's complaints, then that's a problem. We really don't want complaints. We want to be a regular retailer. People come, go, they want to feel safe, they want to have a good experience. Obviously, consume it at home in a safe, regulated way. But, you know, nobody driving by that doesn't know we're there should not kind of think twice. It's something different. It's going to blend into the community is our goal, and that tends to be always.
If I could just jump in quick, I want to just clarify a couple of things and ask a couple of questions. I read through a lot of the legislation. We were drafting regulations in the moratorium, but I just want to confirm, and while the hearing is open. So we will require that signage be in accordance with our regulations, but in my review of the law, the state's guidelines for what they can put on their property for signage are far more restrictive. We can't regulate content, the state has. So they are very limited from the state's perspective. They can't have certain things all over their sign and all over the windows and all kinds of stuff going on as far as advertisements go. So while we don't regulate that, the state has taken a position on that.
And sorry, do you mind?
Sure.
What's interesting too, because we're adult use only, we have the tightest restrictions. Had we been a medical, had we been a hybrid, which means you're both, you could use the word dispensary. We can't even use the word dispensary. Like, we can't have anything in our name and our sign that reference, you know, cannabis or a dispensary or a pot shop, or whatever. Like, it really has, we can really just put our name, which is higher collective, right? That's kind of honestly, the only thing we can do. So it's gonna be very, very kind of discreet signage, and obviously no flashing anything. It's very kind of mute.
So one of the other things that kind of gets into one of the criteria for odor monitoring, my understanding is that none of the product comes to your facility packaged. So it's not a bulk shipment and there's packaging, everything is pre-packaged. So there's very little odor because it's not open to the air, sort of exposed.
Yeah, correct. I mean, I'm guessing it kind of depends on volume. We'll have deliveries maybe 3 times a week. And delivery is maybe 20 minutes, but everything is kind of sealed, wrapped, child resistant. So yeah, there's really no odor. Even if you're in the store, you're going to be hard pressed to kind of smell anything, to be honest.
And then I think the last 2 things are, well, I guess the last question I have, my understanding is that the state, your permit to allow consumption on the property would jeopardize your approval with the state. If you were not patrolling people and they were consuming in the parking lot, that would be a violation of a state license. They would not allow that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there is no on-site consumption. That's the regulation. I think if somebody were fined, I think it's going to be a fine or something, right? But it is not allowed. The state might down the road do online consumption lounges. This is not a consumption lounge. It's not designed for consumption lounge. We don't want to get into it. It doesn't make sense. Consumption lounges, imagine like an outdoor bar kind of area where you're allowed to consume. Like I said, this is not it. This is a pure retail play. There will never be on-site consumption at this site.
And then the last thing I think is just a statement for the commission. The law does allow the town to assess the applicant costs if for some reason, not that it's expected or that you're seeing them in all locations, but if there were costs related to sort of this initial push when the property or when the facility opens and there was traffic issues and there was a cop that was needed, the town, the bill allows the town to assess the applicant those fees. So there would be no cost to the town, and it can be up to $50,000 for the first 30 days, I believe, is what I read. So if that were something that was necessary, that would not be a cost that the town would have to bear.
And I forgot to mention, I mean, what we try to work with the local police department and kind of help coordinate in opening with them. So if they recommend a police detail at the intersection or on the parking lot for the first 2 weeks, we're 100% okay with that. That's something we encourage, to be quite honest. And then we can kind of evaluate over time how long we want to continue doing this for. But because the way Connecticut's rolling it out, the way it happened in Massachusetts, there was 1 or 2 for the first couple of months, and you'd see this crazy amount of traffic. That's not the case in Connecticut. Connecticut's going to roll out, 50, 60 out of the gate, and I don't think you're going to see this big kind of peaks and valleys. I think it's going to be pretty. You're going to see, a healthy amount, hopefully across the board, but nothing, nothing that's going to cause traffic issues like you saw in Massachusetts when they opened one, and it was like a 5-hour wait to get it.
Yeah, they opened one in Leicester, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I remember it was like people standing out for hours waiting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not happening here.
In the freezing cold. It was pretty funny.
Their process is very different. Very different than Connecticut.
Minor housekeeping note, Commissioner Rebecca Sinowski has joined us.
Last question I have is we met with Eric, who's I think part of your application. He's here. I can't see him. So when we met and went down through the criteria. The other thing that we had talked about related to parking, just to make sure that there weren't issues, was speaking with the owner of Phelps about using the portion of the property now set aside for rental, which is sort of, there's a small parking lot behind the garden shop, the former garden shop. So I didn't know if you'd had that discussion and if that is on the
Yeah,
table.
we did have a discussion that is an option for us if we need it. But as I mentioned, I think we have 158 parking spots. I'd be extremely amazed if we need more parking spots beyond that. Honestly, will not be needed.
Okay.
And I guess for the record, Eric's wife, Janita, is our partner, social equity partner.
Any other commissioners have any questions or comments?
How many employees do you think you'll have?
Good question. We will probably have about 25 full-time and about 7 to 8 part-time is what we're aiming for. We'll have 10 registers. Not all registers will be open all day, every day, right? It's probably going to be ramping up on Friday, Saturdays. And then on the Monday or Tuesday, we might have 5, 6 registers open. And then same thing, we'll probably scale up a few extra people in the evening. We tend to kind of people come after work and so forth, but and we are definitely going to prioritize trying to hire locally. That's something you try to do everywhere. Trying to find, have local job fairs and try to bring people into the community that are interested in working in a dispensary, with our training and all those things. So
Do employees have to be older than 21?
yes, no one inside. Unlike a medical dispensary, where you can obviously have children who need medical, obviously coming with a guardian parent. Yeah, no one's allowed in. So if somebody shows up with their child, that child has to leave the car. They're not even allowed inside the dispensary. So that tends to be a bit of an education. Sometimes, whatever, young mother showed up with a baby and I was like, I'm sorry, you have to come back. That doesn't work. So
You expect a lot of UConn students being as close as we are to UConn, the population we have from UConn here.
probably, I don't know, probably some. I think, I'm guessing here, but I think they tend to kind of stay with wherever they're getting it from now is probably easier, cheaper than some of this. I don't know the exact numbers, to be honest, but I'm guessing there's gonna be some who wants to try to get it legally and probably with a little bit safer product. But I think it's whoever's getting it now is probably have a pretty steady way of getting it. I don't think that's gonna change.
Any other commissioners? Yeah, I'll open it for public comment. Jim Marshall.
Yes, thanks. Jim Marshall, 46 Hill Road. First off, I just want to say I wish you, luck. I actually don't have any objection to the type of establishment. Before this goes too much further with the debate over the merits of cannabis in this town. Technically, by the regulations, its location is not allowed by right for a cannabis establishment. They're within 350 feet of the property line for the daycare, Kids Kingdom, I believe there's Kids Castle, across the street.
That's not the way the regulation is written, Jim.
It's written permanent premises, which involves a lot, but the regulation doesn't get the location doesn't get a permit without incorporating a lot that the building is situated on. The parking, the site circulation, that's all part of the permanent premise. You can't get a building permit without that lot as part of the factor.
Mike, your thoughts on that?
So when we reviewed the text, when we were going through the process of drafting it, I presented the commission with multiple versions of buffer maps. And we looked at what would it be to have it at 500, what would it be to have it at 750? I don't know if we went further or if we went to 1,000. And we had the discussion about this area because of the location of Kids Kingdom. Anything beyond this, the 500 feet would put that whole section of town out effectively. And so I think we proposed it at 750. And then the commission struck it and went back to the 500. The way that it was written, it talks about the permit premise, which based upon the discussion was the premise seeking a permit. So we're not doing the buffering based upon the 11-acre site or whatever it is, 14 acres site for Phelps, doing it based upon the portion of the property that is subject to
interpretation of the comment. It's a standard zoning regulation. The permanent premises is the limits of the lot. It's a 500-foot buffer. It's the same. Unfortunately, you guys can't erode some of these requirements for one project. Because then that buffer is saying that same thing applies for the 1,000-foot buffer. When this gentleman doesn't want to retail cannabis establishment closer across the street from Dunkin' Donuts because it happens to be closer. You're cutting hundreds of feet off of the buffer that you just established. That's setting a precedent for all future applications and all future interpretations of regulations that include a buffer. You simply cannot do it. It's not a debate over cannabis regulations. It's not a debate over whether it should or shouldn't be in town. It's not allowed on that location based on the proximity of the daycare as the permanent premises are written. Premises include the lot. It's the definition in the zoning regulation. It's not allowed. It's as simple as that.
despite any interpretation by Mr. D'Amato that is inaccurate.
So to be clear, I'm not interpreting anything. We had this discussion on July 19th.
That's not the way the zoning ordinance is written.
The commission had the discussion. We presented the maps. I can provide the minutes to you guys to look at it.
He's presented a map of the 500-foot buffer that closes that site. I'm sorry, again, I wish that I don't actually have a problem with cannabis. I just think you can't erode a zoning regulation the way we're currently trying to do. So I wish you the best of luck. I hope you find another suitable site. This site is not based on the regulation, by the merits of the regulation and definitions of ordinance. It is not allowed. It is that simple. There's really no need for any further debate over the merits of the cannabis establishment. I hate to be Debbie Downer. I don't want to be, but that's the case.
Okay, Nick Tella.
Tell us 49 Myrtle. Jim's completely right as far as the 350 for his measurements that he used, I believe lot to lot. So terminology of importance in that you guys had for the special regulations around cannabis. Facility is not defined in definitions on that special regulations. I also go into your regulations, the regular 340 page planning and zoning, it's not defined at all. So it's up for debate as far as facility. Premises is again not defined in the cannabis special regulations. Refer to zoning regulations definition, which is on page 22. A lot or parcel and all buildings, uses, and structures located thereon. Again, a lot. Lots is not defined on special regulations. So referring back to zoning regulations, 340 page document, page 18 to 19, basically land under unified ownership and mentions parcel. Parcel is in regards to zoning regulations, page 21. Pretty much that lot of land, your border, the edge of your lot is what they're talking about when it comes to premises. Oh, here it is. So 3.1A, it says all retail establishments shall meet the following criteria. So shall not be located within 1,000 feet of any of, we don't have that issue. The next thing it shall meet is it cannot be within 500 feet of a child daycare facility. Again, there's that word facility. It's not defined, so it's up for interpretation. Or church, when measured using a direct line, which is important, direct line between any part of the permit premises. Premises, again, is defined in those zoning regulations. And any part of a lot, again, definitions in zoning. So the application that was submitted, this is a kind of a screenshot of the map that was used in the application. When you look at their 500-foot buffer using Phelps Way, you can clearly see the line that goes right over Kids Kingdom facility. I had also today looked at Google Maps and basically, and I submitted this to Mike so he has it and I can give it to you. Facility is not defined. When I think of a child care facility, I think of the building and I think of playgrounds and everything incorporating a child care facility. So to me, I would take in consideration the playground. So if you wanted to use facility as the playground, that point to the lot, which is the beginning of the property, right to the entrance with the driveway behind the building, which is still Phelps Plaza, that is 468.94 feet. So it does not meet this regulations as far as being over 500 feet. If you use lot to lot, if you use facility to lot, or however you may do, direct line, it does not meet the regulation at all. I have my own personal opinion, but that doesn't even matter. When it comes to the regulations, sorry, it doesn't.
Any other member of the public wish to comment?
I just did, sorry, James Marshall, 46 Fisher Hill. Again, guys, I'd just say every step we take that erodes
the regulations in the middle of a particular project erodes the regulations and the protection that this town has. This is clearly not compliant. Clearly not compliant.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're gonna continue this to our next meeting. Mike,
You can.
Yep.
Motion to continue the public hearing to the next meeting.
do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And, all opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we will continue.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda, PC 22-13, text amendment application pertaining to modifications to the strategic development zone, section 12.15. Applicant James Marshall.
Hey guys, so to start on 7 notes. I appreciate it. Concerned that- all right. So, once again, guys, thank you very much for your continued input and discussion related to this application. Just as background for the record, my name is James Marshall, 46 Fisher Hill Road, and I am the applicant for PZ 2213. This is a continuation from the last meeting, so I don't want to rehash too much from the last meeting, but as a recap, this application is really a two-part proposal. It seeks to do two things. The first is that it seeks to revise and refine the text of section 1215 for the strategic development zone that was newly enacted in our regulations earlier this year. Via the removal of the proactive application process contained within. And it also seeks to establish additional requirements that limit the size and scope of development that utilizes the SDZ to something that's more appropriate for the scale, infrastructure, and character of Willington. The second part of the application is that it seeks to incorporate a warehouse definition or use definition and subcategory definitions and corresponding updates to the section 5.11 table of uses to include warehouse definitions and other uses. Again, I'm excited to continue this application and discussion with you guys tonight and the members of the community. I'm looking forward to hearing input. Again, I said it last meeting, I hope this is a dialogue because I think the best things come from that. So with that background in place, I submitted a clean, what I'm going to call a clean version, a clean draft of this regulation of my proposed text amendments, which I believe you guys should have received from Mike this morning or today.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. So the hope here is that by providing, I know there was a lot of red and a lot of discussion, flipping pages back and forth. The hope is that by providing a clean version, you get some, it provides a little clarity as to the, selectiveness of the proposed modifications. I'll reiterate again, I do feel that there is some inherent value to the and benefits of the flexibility of incorporating an overlay zone. SDG for specific strategic, but in particular guided development, which is why this application seeks to provide additional oversight and restrictions. Again, the biggest change removes the proactive application process due to its unsatisfactory level of due diligence at a 30% threshold. It was painfully evident based on the most recent and test run of this development with the PZ 2210 for the logistics center. I will also reiterate, because it was discussed last time, these changes do not prevent someone from developing the property the way that they see fit. Again, maintaining the SPZ gives them added flexibility to propose uses that wouldn't otherwise be entertained in the underlying zone. And this is true whether it's both a town resident proposing the project on a property or an outside developer, as is the case with the logistics center. It doesn't matter. The need for regulations and control of what can be proposed is the same for the regulation, regardless of who's proposing it. And again, this is a request for special consideration. Any project utilizing the SCC is a request for special consideration that would not otherwise be allowed by the underlying zone. As such, I'll reiterate again, it should come with additional safeguards and measures and be subject to a higher level of due diligence than the 30% threshold the proactive application process affords. Now, I did have a discussion with Mike yesterday at his request, and although it was admittedly generally unproductive, as we tend to fundamentally disagree on the appropriateness of portions of the STC, the discussion did yield a little bit of interesting information. So I spoke last time about having looked into our surrounding towns zoning regulations and not seeing anything that had remotely this low bar of due diligence that is evident for a proactive application process in the SPC. So Mike inferred that there was an example of this in the Northeast region that was subject to PROG. So it piqued my curiosity. So I'm going to point you to East Windsor's regulation. And unfortunately, I didn't want to print this 11 times or 8 times for you guys, because honestly, you have a copy of it in your zoning regulations right now. It's the exact same regulation. So it's literally the exact same resolution. Actually, I'm going to pass this around to you just so you can see it, so you don't have to necessarily trust me. There you go. So that is East Windsor's planned commercial development district. Same charts, same graphics. It's almost verbatim what was proposed in Willington. Yet this is East Windsor. I don't know. Apparently, land use regulation development is a one-size-fits-all consideration as developed by Mr. D'Amato. But this is regulations like this, overlay regulations like this should not be a one-size-fits-all planning approach. Period. Willington is not East Windsor. Willington is not over the river from Bradley International Airport. Honestly, I suspect that that version is the version that you guys all looked at back in January 18th and decided to submit to CROG based on Mr. Parcells' statements saying that Route 5 corridor and et cetera. So I think you just regurgitated the message you looked at. But it floors me that we don't have a fundamental personalized approach to a strategic development zone in Willington that isn't regurgitated from a much larger, much more industrialized area of the state. So one big critical difference between the two is, again, that regulation clearly defines a specific area or areas in town. And I can't highlight it from you, but I'm going to show this little tiny map. So it limits, it's a focused strategic special development district, limited to the industrial Route 5 corridor along the river, follows the highway, the industrial area, and the commercial district right up above. It is not townwide. It doesn't have parcels that aren't DI zone or DC zone above 5 feet, which is above 5 acres, which is the entirety of our town, guys. Almost every region in this town is applicable to this SCC. It's not focused. It doesn't have the oversight that's required of an overlay district. It's just not focused. Again, another example of this Essex, although I think it was his partner, John, in that instance, but Essex is another example. They recently adopted, as of December of last year, something similar as an overlay zone. But again, it's very focused. And guess what? The residents fought back about what was being adopted or proposed by Mr. Guskowski, I may not be pronouncing his name right, and refined the regulation to a much more focused and specific area in town, limited the size and height requirements, and voted to approve it. And they are more protected accordingly because of it. I'll also note, because it's relevant to some of the concerns here, that just south of East Windsor, and you guessed it, South Windsor, residents in the PZC have recently denied large-scale warehouse projects similar to PZ 2210. A 360,000 square foot warehouse with initial wetlands approval was later rejected by the PZC. And the developer sued the town. And not while they were suing and waiting for resolution on that lawsuit, the developer applied for a similar project on the same parcel again, and were rejected again. The lawsuit is still pending. And when you look at developers like grow companies and what we just went through, everybody in this everybody in town basically was tiptoeing over themselves to not upset the apple cart or fear of being sued. To the point where it caused a lot of angst, undue concern, all because we didn't have a regulation that actually appropriately provided a level of due diligence that it was easier to discern that an application was not appropriate for this town. Again, I will reiterate, although the timing may be different, and I don't know, but earlier versions of this isn't groundbreaking what I'm proposing. The earlier versions of this regulation did not have the correct application process as initially proposed to the EDC. I will give you this. Sorry, I have too many. There it is. So, apologize for the screenshots, but if you don't mind missing these out. So this is the original version presented to the EDC. I don't know if it's the original version because we don't say drafts. But that is a screenshot of the YouTube video of the December 8th EDC meeting. With a quote below it from Mr. D'Amato, as his presentation stated, that you're talking probably a 75% design. And so this is what the commission uses to understand the proposed uses and the extent of the development and evaluate this criteria and determine if they think it is appropriate. So about 7 minute and 2 second mark in that presentation. The graphics in front of you are his single process overview. I enlarged it on the next page. Sorry, it's a screen grab. I know it's a little hard to see, but it involves a single concurrent submission for a special permit and zone change. And again, per Mike's discretion, a 75% level of development, subject to public hearing approval, which is exactly what the removal of the proactive application process is seeking. So, I mean, you guys can look at the video, but you'll have to trust me on it. But again, this was as it was originally conceived and presented to the EDC. This is not overly exciting. It just provides a stricter level of due diligence by an applicant or a special or strategic development project. So the other, I know the commission has an item on the agenda later on today at the end of the meeting for internal discussion about a moratorium on the use of the strategic development zone, as was pitched and discussed at the last meeting by me. I believe that this application, as presented, is a great first step towards incorporating some necessary protections that can then be further refined during the moratorium with additional research and discussion. I continue to support the moratorium. I think it's a great idea because I think there's a lot to unpack here, and I think there's a significant amount of further research that can be done to really fine tune this. So it's not a regurgitation of an East Windsor regulation, and it is a regulation that serves a point. Following further review of these regulations, of my proposed changes rather, I want to call attention to, again, this incorporates all of the proposed revisions pretty much verbatim. I would call attention to 2 specific sections that I think warrant your further input and insight. The first is section 12.15.3, which is the eligibility, I can't even speak now. Hold on, give me a second. Eligibility and boundary requirements, specifically section B. So my edit changes what was so this is for all parcels not in a commercial or industrial zone. It seeks to change the minimum parcel size from 5 acres to 20 acres. I'm going to be honest that this proposed change has always been a little bit arbitrary feeling to me, but I don't want to further amend this text without further input from you guys. The intent or goal here, or with this change, is to focus the use of the SDZ to appropriate zoning areas in town. And like I said before previously, currently the entirety of the town is captured by this SDZ. It's any district in town that meets a over 5 acre parcel. So I mean, given the timing of this with the development of PZ 2210, I find it hard to believe this requirement, given that, you know, it was an edit after you guys saw it to CROG. That it wasn't incorporated specifically to capture the lot for PZ 2210, which is in R80 zone, as we're all aware of. But given further time to review this, because again, this was submitted to you guys initially 2 or 3 months ago now. I don't forget the time, it's been a long time, before the start of the, or during the public hearing for PZ 2210. You know, I question, I believe that given the fact that you're considering a moratorium, and I believe it would be a good second step. With knowledge that a moratorium is a hopeful next step following approval of this, I almost at this point consider striking that regulation, that section 12.15.3b in its entirety. Now to protect unwanted development throughout the town and focus it in the short term as a stopgap measure to commercial and industrial zones in town, which I believe was the original intent as pitched by the EDC. They wanted to develop the West Willington corridor. The other problem I have with that in further commission is that in further analysis is that the second sentence of that says the commission shall reserve the right to allow for portions of properties to be designated as SDC. What's the point of allowing a minimum lot size if you're just going to say, no, you can develop a portion of it anyway? So increasing any lot size, it's counterproductive, it's counterintuitive. I think that line needs a lot of work. I think striking it now gives the opportunity to more clearly define during the moratorium process and further development what you guys actually want to see and allow in West Willington. You can clearly define a West Willington zone, perhaps. I pitched it briefly at the last meeting. I'm not saying it's the only approach. I welcome your input. I welcome your discussion. So without run on just a few more minutes, guys, I promise, because I think this stuff is important. The second thing that I believe still needs additional input, and I left it open-ended in the initial application, is related to permitted uses and establishing size restrictions on what is allowed in the SDC, so that we don't get absurd proposals like a 1.5 million square foot warehouse. We didn't really get buy-in on or we didn't get too much back and forth on what your thoughts were on sizes. I know there's going to be a lot of research and due diligence needed because I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all parameter for this. But that being said, again, knowing that the moratorium is potentially in consideration and that there will be the time to further develop this and have Mr. D'Amato, for example, research what might be appropriate size limitations for certain proposed uses. I would almost argue that it might be beneficial to just put a blanket max cap on this now, and then be able to further refine it as you go. Again, the moratorium will come up in a month. This affords the protection in the short term. It provides a good starting point. I would propose, I can submit this, I'll submit this to record, but this is just the property card for what I believe is one of the biggest property in town, with the FedEx facility. The primary structure and associated building on that is about 199,000 square feet. I'd argue 200,000 square feet is a good stopgap temporary measure. I propose it as a starting point for discussion. Again, I welcome your input. So Mike did raise a very good point, and I'll give credit where credit is due at that last meeting, that any size restriction should really incorporate a defined limitation on the number of primary uses on the lot. Otherwise, you're going to have 6 200,000 square foot buildings instead of one big 1.4. I welcome Mike's input on how best to craft that regulation. I think he's best suited to provide that feedback. So I think there's a way of crafting a language to better protect the town. I think it doesn't necessarily need to be just a size limitation. I think you could limit things to high intensity uses, not just in size, but also in water demand and septic system demands. I think some of those comments were relayed by Ms. Demers, the chair of the Willington Conservation Commission, with her public comment in support of this application at the last meeting. I thought they were great ideas. Some other public comments in support of this application suggested a percentage of open land might be a good regulation to potentially rope into this, as well as proximity and separation between buildings of similar use. So the remaining changes we discussed last week have been incorporated kind of verbatim. I don't think they're groundbreaking. I think they're warranted. Personally, I hope you guys feel so as well, related to the SDZ. But I would, again, with some further discussion and clarity, I think that I would, again, I wouldn't propose it if I didn't hope that you approved of it and passed it. But I think it's an excellent starting point that can be, again, further evaluated with much more clarity over the coming hopeful 6 or 8 months that the moratorium might afford between now and its approval in the 6-month time period. The other component of this is about warehouse definition. Again, it's not a unique consideration. Other towns, we talked about it, East Windsor, South Windsor, they're all going through it in the region and grappling with it now. I noted some others in the last meeting. I can look them up again, but I don't think they were captured in the minutes, so I should probably submit that. You know, I understand there are likely numerous ways to approach this, and I know the SCZ has taken up the bulk of this discussion in my conversation point. I think it's one of the more important ones, but I also think the warehouse and integration throughout the document could be the more cumbersome version of this. So I know it's not a one size fits all. I know it's not an easy suggestion, but I think, again, and I'll state it again, at minimum, the regulation should differentiate between warehouse storage uses, distribution and logistics centers, and freight terminals. I added honestly in here to this talking point because that's what South Windsor has just provided a 1-year moratorium on, so that they can further refine that regulation. I'm very interested, because we didn't really get into it, to hear your thoughts on where we feel appropriate warehouse development could go. And I might suggest that it's probably prudent to ask Mr. D'Amato and our land use department to do some market research, for lack of a better term, on how other towns in the region are defining this or have defined it. I did give some examples. I talked about some examples at the last meeting. I'm not going to go into that again. So that's the bulk of my response to some of the conversation from the last meeting and some of the the feedback I've gotten separately from residents of the town. If prudent, I would request the commission consider potentially continuing this hearing again until at least the next meeting, so that it's open through your discussion on whether or not you're going to push a moratorium on the SDZ through, which comes at the end of this meeting. There's no extension needed to do so, but again, I'm happy and available to work at however many meetings is needed to get these regulation changes in a good spot where you as members of the commission are comfortable approving them. So I want to thank everybody as well for the public comments and support. I know there was a bunch uploaded today. I hope they got them all. Might be another reason to hopefully continue, because I'm not sure everything was logged. But I do sincerely hope that you as the members of the commission vote to advance and approve the changes noted within the SUV with some additional clarification and insight. I support and urge you to advance the moratorium through the crowd and through the public hearing and hopefully approval, so that we can actually continue the discussion and drill into this in much more detail. And I thank you very much again. We'll continue to do so for your continued thoughtful consideration of all of these points. I know it's a lot. I know it's going on. I appreciate it. I think it's important, and I know it's hard to describe, but there is a lot to unpack. So thank you. I appreciate. Don't hesitate to ask me further questions.
Okay, Jim, it's my understanding there might be some limitations of what we can do here. Mike, I wonder if you could speak to those.
Through a text amendment, you can only approve the regulation as submitted or something more restrictive. So you can't take something that was proposed and say, well, we like that it's proposed to be removed, we want to keep it. We advertised and referred and filed a regulation which is proposed with modifications as submitted by him. So we can't dial any of it back with the existing regulation. can make more restrictive changes, you can take more out, you can take criteria that say you've got to provide X and say, well, now you got to provide X, Y, and Z. But you can't make any change which would be seen as less restrictive, because it would be basically a fault in the referral in the notice.
Excellent. So I think everything I've described today is more restrictive than what was originally proposed. Striking or changing again, either from 5 to 20 acres or striking that 15.3B, which allows any parcel in town. So striking that would be more restrictive. Imposing appropriate area limitations would be more restrictive, as would be defining the number of buildings on site. So unless there's some concern, I don't think there's anything, unless obviously you'd be able to propose anything less. But again, you can be more restrictive, pass this thing, protect this, or pass something like this, protect, and provide a higher level of due diligence in the interim. You're going to be considering a moratorium that I urge you again to pass, and the commission can create their own PZC application and dial this in with further detail. That wouldn't be subject to that.
Any other commissioners have any questions or comments?
For the Dollar General store, how big was that lot?
Second, the lot, not the building.
Right.
Second.
I heard Phelps Plaza was 11 acres tonight.
It's 11 or 14, because of the slope, but there's work, at least there were 2 parcels going.
So far, 17.9. I think you have the packet, but. 2.6.
Dollar General was 2.6.
2.6, according to the assessor's office, 2.66.
Any other commissioners have any question or comment? Member of the public have any questions or comments, please? Yes, Nick.
Nick 49 Myrtle, things are wrote down here. I do like the 30% for small businesses, because I understand when you start getting into more detail, the cost may be going up for those businesses. So maybe take into consideration a smaller plan coming from those type of businesses, but those large, Perot type of people coming in here, maybe putting that at a 70%. But again, you don't want to scare away the small businesses. Personally, I would like to see the square footage limitations as appropriate. I mean, maybe 200,000 or whatever it is. I think that's suitable. Building development on land, no more than 25%, especially in the R80 zones. I'm not too sure with the R80. I think I was told R80 is a floating zone.
No,
It is not, okay. So yeah, so 25% in R80 in particular. Moratorium put in place until this is all hashed out. I definitely think it's appropriate. And when researching other towns, I mean, we shouldn't be looking, to the west. Let's look to the east. Those towns, Ashford, Eastford, more identify. We're more like them than we are of a Manchester, Stafford, and such like that. And again, copy and paste in municipality regulations and just putting here, Willington is just. It's lazy and inappropriate, so that's all I have.
Ralph Tillis, 47 Village Hill Road. I'll try to avoid going on a rant like I did at the last meeting.
I didn't have that for you.
This is a tough regulation. I understand the value. I understand the desire to encourage business and facilitate its journey through the process. And from that regard, STZ type zones make sense. But I think that Jim is correct. When you look at East Windsor, it was a targeted area that the SDZ applied to. We did not do that with this regulation. It's townwide, wherever you want. If it's not a DI or DC zone, well, it's just gotta be 5 acres or more. Okay, fine. I'm sorry, I couldn't accept that. I didn't like this. I didn't like this in the beginning because of the lack of participation of the folks sitting at this table. It all came from Mr. D'Amato. You guys listened to him. EDC listened to him, but there was very little coming back to Mike from the commissions, be it planning and zoning or be it economic development. Yeah, there were some general vague ideas thrown out on the table, and the expectation is Mike would run with it. Well, you got something that, as I said at the public hearing, these regulations are flawed. And you should really sit down and have a work session with the commissions, EDC, planning and zoning, and the public. And let's kick around what is appropriate for Willington. You know, yeah, I want to see more business because I like to see my taxes stay stable or go down. Not that that's going to happen, but anyway, that's really all I have. The definition of warehouse is a must because there's varying levels. The other thing related to that is the trip generation factors that ITE uses, International Transportation Engineers. There's various levels under warehouse, but there's also various levels under other kinds of businesses. A high traffic business may have a trip generation factor way up there compared to some warehouse definitions. But it's the size that matters. We have a small business with a high trip generation factor, but a small facility. And it's not a big deal. But when you've got a 1 million square foot building, I mean, that's what the factors apply to, is the square footage of the building. Now, you're talking about 1 million square feet, it may have a lower trip generation factor, but it's still a big number as far as vehicles in and out. And when you look at traffic studies, great. So what did they give us on that previous application? The number of trips from that facility, but they never did speak to how it meshes with existing traffic. That's important. Because it's somewhere along the line, there's going to be congestion. And as we've seen with TA, no one has nudged the State Traffic Commission to enforce the clause on the permit that TA got for their trip generation. And there are things that could be done both with signage and a reconfiguration of that interchange to better facilitate the traffic flow. But no one's pushed the issue with the STC, and perhaps it's up to the town to do that. There's things that could be done to improve that. Signage at exit 71, in general, the entire area, it sucks because it's a bunch of little signs, haphazard little signs at every intersection. Now, when you're a stranger coming into town and you're looking for a particular thing, you've got to scan every individual sign before you can find what you're looking for. One big sign would be much more efficient, in my opinion. What do I know? I'm just a dumb engineer, but I think Jim's on the right track with this, but I think it really requires a joint venture, a workshop, this commission, economic development, and the public, and the people who are going to have to live with whatever you all decide. And all right, sorry, I kind of got on the roll there. That's it.
Any other member of the public wish to comment? Yes.
Paul Carbarell, 430 River Road. I am in agreement that this is a flawed document. I am against striking the proactive application process. That's what we just went through. It showed us enough information to realize that we did not want it. It showed me enough information that their driveway proposed was very close to my bedroom window. Granted, it didn't show where doors were, or petitions were inside. It's 30%. They're just trying to give you a broad view of, this is what we're thinking of. Do you think this will work? And then you can vote on it. And then you can go forward and put within place. We need more information. We didn't like this, we didn't like that. Definitions do need to be worked on. If you're thinking of a moratorium to go over this, I agree with Ralph. Maybe the two boards and Mike get together. But if we're going to do that, I don't see the necessity going forward with Mr. Marshall's proposal this evening. If we're going to do that, it's just more paperwork to add on top of the confusion if you're going to be reworking it. So I'm thinking the moratorium and reworking it between the two commissions and Mike. And if someone would like to have Mr. Marshall involved in that conversation, because he seems very knowledgeable, we'd have no problem with that. But as far as going forward with Mr. Marshall's proposal, I just say no.
Any other member of the public wish to comment?
You have someone online.
Oh, do we have someone online, Mike?
Hi, this is Kathy Demers, 48 Mason Road. Mr. Marshall mentioned that I had submitted comments, and he mentioned that I was chair of the Willington Conservation Commission. Although that's true, I just wanted to clarify that my comments were from the perspective of a private citizen and don't necessarily reflect the views of any other members of the Willington Conservation Commission. Also, I'd like to encourage you to think about going forward with a moratorium. I think that having additional time to review the regulations in totality and work together with EDC, I like Ralph's proposal to do that together with the two commissions and then have it go through a public hearing so that the public could also be part of that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate your input.
Thank you, Kathy. I apologize for misrepresenting you. I didn't mean to.
Any other member of the public wish to comment? Can we have a motion to leave this hearing open?
Should we leave it open?
I think we should while we discuss the moratorium.
Why? We have an application that is separate from the moratorium. How are they related? This is an application from a resident applied to make a change to public hearing on that. Is the moratorium going to bring us new information relevant to this application? I'm not sure how it relates. There's the point of order, right? I'm not really, I think if this was a subdivision application and we were going to be talking about something else along the subdivision regulations, they'd be separate things. This kind of stands alone. I'm not speaking to its merits. I'm just saying this is a standalone application. This is the public hearing, no decisions are made. That comes when we put it on the agenda to speak about this application. I'm not sure
You don't
that they're
technically,
related.
sorry, I don't mean to, you don't technically have a moratorium on the table yet. You have no resolution or honestly.
But it's on our agenda.
It is on your agenda, but it's not.
I'm not sure. I just don't see how another agenda item exactly relates to this particular application. What would the impact be? We're going to talk about a moratorium. How is that going to affect Mr. Marshall's
Well,
application?
what is the impact of closing this hearing?
I don't know.
If you reject the moratorium, you eliminate public input if you close this application.
Well, I think the positive thing in holding the public hearing open is having more back and forth conversations about morphing the PZ.
Right, but then we'd have to morph his application. we're not morphing, what we're voting on, if we have this document submitted by Mr. Marshall.
Right.
That's what we're deciding on, nothing else. We could take that application, he submitted an application as if it was a subdivision act. And we can modify his application, make it more restrictive. We can't say, oh, we like this, but we're gonna add in the proactive. No, we cannot do that. We take his application, modify it.
True.
To make it more restrictive or not, and decide yes or no, and that's the end of the decision.
If I may. just-
So hold on, I got the floor right now. So that's my point, that even if we put a moratorium on it, which is fine, we still have to decide on this application
As it is.
as it
right
is
there.
right as it is.
Right, right.
And we can modify it, we can make a motion to modify, and
Yeah.
and that's it, that's our purview.
Mhm.
If we say we reject it, and then we put a moratorium on it, okay. If we say we approve it and then put a moratorium on, I don't know, it almost seems to me that they're two separate issues. And we're painting ourselves into some sort of a conflict here. I'm just thinking aloud.
So we close the public hearing. We make amendments to that, what's been presented by Mr. Marshall.
Right.
The PZC puts that forward, and that would open another public hearing.
Yeah, and you could run it through the regular text amendment process. The temporary moratorium as written, and I had some printer issues, I gotta grab it up, I know we have it, right? We have the moratorium language that we're gonna look at. It describes the purpose of the moratorium, because you have to have a purpose, is to endeavor to go through a planning process in evaluating the SDZ.
Okay.
Right, right. I mean, the purpose of the moratorium is to put a hold so we can evaluate it.
Right, there has to be a purpose. You can't just push pause and do nothing.
Right.
You've got to take some action in the time.
Right. So that's why I don't know, I'm just not sure. Sooner or later, this public hearing has to close, and we have to make a decision on the application. We have to do that.
So just,
No matter what we do about moratorium.
right, and I guess I have to preface this now. I'm not telling you what you should do. I'm
I
not telling you
understand.
what I think you should do. You are of your own free will to make these decisions.
Correct.
You have a number of different irons in the fire at the same time, right? We have
Right.
this application, we have the moratorium, and then potential changes to this regulation if the commission wants to go through that process.
Correct.
You can't get the moratorium adopted in time, as they've mentioned, without timing out on this. So you couldn't keep this open, run through the moratorium process. You're gonna run into issues, I mean, maybe with extensions, haven't run that.
That's my dilemma.
And I don't want there to be concerns that if, this discussion goes, well, let's not move forward with this application, let's undertake our own. I don't know, I don't want there to be concerns about what that would entail. So my suggestion as an option would be take 12.15 through this application in consultation with the applicant, if he's okay with it. My suggestion is you delete the entire text. Take 12.15 and just put reserved. Immediately adopt and route the moratorium for 6 months. And then if you are interested in the planning process as Ralph described, then get a workshop on the agenda with the EDC to go through the process. But the only way you stop the potential risk of something happening now is because you can't do, as Mr. Teller described, or as you guys have described, keep the 30% for a small project, because that's less restrictive. You can't do that with this. Delete the whole section.
Well, you say the whole section, I'm
Delete 12.15, delete the zone, delete everything.
just delete the whole.
The SDZ goes away.
Right.
With the understanding that you then adopt the moratorium, and in that process, go through a workshop with the EDC at the table to make revisions with the whole regulation on the table.
That seems to be a clean slate, which I feel that's what I'm feeling, that we say, okay. We put it to the test, it did its job. We felt that a business came in, it was inappropriate, it was the zone change was, we didn't indict the project, we indicted the zone change. And we said that that wasn't appropriate. Fine. So the regulation did its work. It was a little weird and uncomfortable. It's the first time we ever tested it. So anyway, it did its job. So now we want to draw a line and say, gosh, we need to work on this. The litmus, the test by fire showed some, I don't want to say flaws, but they showed some ambiguities and things that could probably be improved. I like looking at it that way. And Mr. Marshall brought up some excellent points. Mr. Tull brought up some good points. Ralph brought up good points. Everyone that input. Kathy brought up good points. So clearly, there's room for improvement. So we want to stop it and revisit it. But we don't want to hold Mr. Marshall's thing hostage. We don't want to get into a procedural conflict. So if we somehow want to just throw this out and then reintroduce it, that's what I'm thinking. I'm not saying it very well, but I'm rusty. Right? Isn't that what you just said? I just put it in my own word. what you
Yeah,
just said.
it's just that if, and I don't know what the commission is thinking, but if you, but as it has been suggested, if you wanted to keep the 30% design for certain projects or make other changes which were not more restrictive, right? You can't do that as written.
No, yeah.
So, but without wanting to create concern that if we take the time to go through the process as been suggested, we are going to continue to be open to it. You can certainly try to run the moratorium. It's going to take us 30 to 45 days to get it scheduled. I could refer it in the morning to CROG. We're 30 days out on a hearing. But there's still going to be a gap. It's not a huge gap. The only way to rescind that, to get rid of it, would be to delete the whole reg. Move 12.15 as a placeholder and start from the beginning. And then we could schedule a workshop with EDC and we could look at regulations to cap building sizes, all the things that are here. We would have to fold it into a new application that could come from a member of the public, or the commission could just initiate it.
Right. Which we've done for most zone changes. We are the applicant for many of them.
Right.
I mean, regulation changes and zone changes. Sorry.
But I don't see any other way to get through if that's, I mean, if the commission just likes it as proposed, you can close the hearing and you can adopt the reg as written.
Right.
And that leaves the SDZ as proposed, and you're free to go either way.
If I may, there is a warehouse component that's separate from the SDZ related to this that, also needs addressing. And I know I'm sorry, there's a cost associated with applying for these, text change applications. But my concern is if, what happens with the close of the public hearing, because I think honestly, there hasn't been much engagement on how to address warehouse use. Or Mr. Comments about intensity of use related to that. So if you close the public hearing, where does that discussion go? If that were the case, without, I mean, you have the opportunity now, should it be, I will say I'm not necessarily against striking the SDZ as the stopgap measure so that it can be much more further vetted with a 6-month moratorium, or 8 months, honestly, because it's going to take time to get the moratorium through. The striking of the SDZ eliminates the short-term need for something like a large data center or something. But
I mean, you opened up, I mean, you submitted an application, here's the public hearing. I think everything we talked about, warehouse, that would be under our discussion. That door's been opened, it was part of the public hearing, so we can talk about it. But
I just think it would be nice for the public to have the ability to comment on,
they
that
don't
discussion
get, but I mean, when we make our decision, that isn't public comment. Just our decision, or once it's on the agenda, our discussion and decision-making is close to the public hearing, so we don't make any decisions. If you want to introduce, if you as the applicant want to introduce more information about certain aspects of your application, I'm sure we'd be willing to keep it open for you to do that. But the decision isn't made during the public hearing, it's made during our discussion, which is close to the public. So no matter how that goes, sooner or later, the public hearing gets closed and we make our decision and the public can't comment anymore. So if you think we're going to get more information about warehousing,
well, that's your prerogative. I think there's plenty of due diligence that can be done. I think you guys can direct your zoning agent to, provide some due diligence on both the you know, what you perhaps want to see. You haven't given any direction or, you know, any insight. You can do that.
We wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that during the public hearing anyway.
My request was to try to get, you know, a back and forth and honestly open public buy-in on some of the.
Right.
And I get that you want to have some control on. the
No,
discussion and
it's
direction
not,
of the
no,
PZC, but-
don't, Ms. Marsh, don't get me wrong. Public hearings are designed to be heard from the public, not the commission. I mean, really, we look through our case law from our attorneys going way back. That's what the public hearing is for, information from the public. And then we make our decision based on what we've heard and seen, and we're allowed to do research based on what we've heard and seen. That's kind of the process.
And I support that. I support any collaborative approach, honestly. So I think that collaborative, I think Ralph's idea, honestly, is a good one.
I was notoriously
As long as it's, you know,
during
does,
COVID, so.
as long as it does get
Nothing
public
to
buy-in, you know, that's, I think the best things are honestly developed with resident buy-in. I hope so. Shut up.
Ralph, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. Mike mentioned striking 12.15 in its entirety. Is that separate from the moratorium?
Once, if they deleted the reg, then the moratorium that they discussed was for 12.15.
Understood.
So if they delete the entire reg, you wouldn't need a moratorium because it wouldn't exist.
Understand, but if you're going to delete the section of the regulations, that's a text change. Is that going to require a public hearing just to delete the section?
We would effectively be deleting everything but the title as a more restrictive change of his application. So they could do it tonight if they wanted to. But because we've already noticed the change to the SDZ at 12.15, they could make more restrictions, make more restrictive changes and essentially get rid of everything but the initial throat clearing to have it be there. You wouldn't need the moratorium. And though we would have to notice it as a totally different ballgame, again, if there was concerns, we could change the language of a moratorium to relate to projects instead of the SDZ. If there was a massive concern about projects, the SDZ is not the only way a project comes to town. So they're not connected. Deletion of the SDZ, temporary pause of the SDZ does not mean that a project of a certain size can't come, that a zone change can't come. So if that's the concern, then we need to move away from the moratorium in the SDZ and look at effectively a moratorium on projects in excess of 200,000 square feet, period, townwide, or greater than an acreage, or whatever it is you want. But we could modify the moratorium for that purpose, to give you time to review the SDZ without anything, regardless of the zone, regardless of the parcel. That's a totally different approach and far more expansive, but you have a lot of options to allay concerns about potential projects showing up while you go through.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I don't, I'm just thinking that we have an application for this change and we have to deal with that in some fashion. We can't just say, oh, we're gonna go work on this, this regulation and just leave this public hearing open forever while we discuss it with the public. I mean, that's not, it's just not how it gets done.
Well,
I could be wrong.
I'm looking at the clean draft of the review, specifically 12.15.7, and there's a whole lot of blank space in here. Places of assembly no more than blank square feet.
Right.
Light manufacturing, including assembly of no more than blank square feet. So this clean draft is really not ready for adoption because there's a lot of blanks that need to be filled in.
Normally you close the public hearing and we have 65 days to make a decision. And that's it. And that's how it rolls. And
So, well,
And that's-
given the amount of blank space that we have in here, I'm thinking if we leave this application open until our next meeting, we can at least try to get some more of that stuff filled in. Does that make sense?
Is there any comment regarding that blank space in particular? That's really that is the blank space and it's a size limitation. I guess what's the process for filling in that blank space?
It's your application.
Okay. No, and that's fine, I guess, so with that degree, again, I left that blank space to allow for this discussion, and for you guys to have something, put an oversight as to how restrictive you felt might be appropriate, so. You know,
Personally, from feedback from me, I mean, as far as that applicant, I think he was from Ashford. He said he was involved in the planning process for best part of 40 years. And he basically said, you know, any town that didn't have public water or sewer, you know, no application greater than 400,000 feet would be considered.
Right.
It seems like that has a lot of merit. So
Yeah, I was actually wondering if water and sewer was not a more appropriate metric to focus on rather than building size. I was
Yeah.
thinking of, I was just imagining, I don't know, somebody mentioned data center. And I think one of the things we have here, the bulk of the town is R80. And it was always R80. And now we have all these people with, you know, they have people with 200 or 300 acre parcels, not suitable for housing. They pay taxes on the property since the town was incorporated, somebody has been, and they want to sell it. So this is a way of managing that. So I was saying, okay, we had a 4-story center that just held computer servers.
Yeah.
With no water use and no sewers, would we care about that? Surrounded by trees in the middle of a 100 acre parcel that you couldn't see. I don't think I'd care about that. And then we'd say, okay, that's a size, built a large building, but it doesn't absorb any resources and but it doesn't create any traffic. And it doesn't do any of those things that we don't like. So I'm wondering if building size is not necessarily the best metric to focus on, as I said. And maybe those utilities that are so precious or resources that are so precious. Maybe that would be a more accurate restriction. Because then that warehouse would say, well, they said 30,000 gallons a day. I was looking at an office, houses are 75 gallons a day, offices are 15, you know, so a fairly good sized office might not have very much water use because it doesn't have a lot of personnel, but have a pretty big building with a very small number of people. So some of the thoughts I have about that, but again, the process is you get an application, you decide on the merits of that application, we modify it, approve or reject. And, you don't talk forever and ever about them, sooner or later. Got to go into the normal thing, and that's what we're elected to do. And not everything is a public referendum, it just isn't. Well, most people would love it to be, but that isn't the process for planning and zoning. Not everything is a referendum.
Well, sooner or later, water is going to become a limiting factor,
I think it has to be.
you know.
I think the people who's concerned about, you know, the number of gallons of the warehouse was absolutely legitimate.
And stormwater.
And stormwater,
Goes back to the size of-
impervious surface, all of that stuff. But I was imagining, okay, I go by and it's a data center, 4 or 5 stories high, with nothing but computers and, okay, maybe there's some heat pollution, gotta worry about, okay, maybe it's got a green roof, you know, all those right things, and it's like, that's a great thing for Willington, why would one, and yet we couldn't get it because our regulations prohibited that. That would seem to be bad, so. I don't think anybody's beating the door down to bring those in, but you never know.
Well, you have to realize that fiber optics under 44.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a procedural question. So can we leave this open? Put in for a strike the zone just so we can do some of the stuff, like how does that? I guess, can we do multiple things at the same time because of the time things have to be in for, on the agenda for?
I think I heard that we would actually strike the zone through the review of Mr. Marshall's application. We would say, we would restrict that. We cannot make it broader. We restrict Mr. Marshall's application to the effect that
It's just a type.
it's just, right, it's a title only. 1215 is basically it, that's in, and it doesn't have any, nothing could be, we couldn't use it. We make it so that we can't use it, and then we rebuild. That's what I think that is that's the procedure. We have to follow a procedure. We can't just throw it, just, we're not doing it anymore. We're gonna
I didn't
change
know
it on our own.
two separate things.
Yeah, we gotta follow some rules here. And it makes it awkward, and I don't know, awkward, it makes it procedural.
to Becky's question, you have closed the hearing or obtain an extension by the 8th of November, so you have some time. There's still extension days left. So in theory, you could start moving in the direction of some other stuff and keep this open and on pause. But it would be the same as the concern about the temporary moratorium in that until you make, you adopt the regulation and it's effective 15 days following publication in newspaper. So you lose 3 weeks from whatever your decision is. So the idea is until anything is effective, it's still in play, right? You could have an application come in tomorrow with the SDC in theory. So the most expeditious thing to do would be to do the deletion through this application.
This application of Mr. Marshall.
You could certainly leave it
We
open.
have to close the public hearing.
Well,
first.
close the public hearing, make the
Right.
decision
Yeah,
tonight. The
yeah,
most
right.
expedient way to say, hey, we want to just stop and think about
Mm-hmm.
everything is to close it tonight and under our unfinished business, make the decision to strike it down to a title. Am I understanding that correctly? Taking notes?
You could, you could do that. There are other ways to do it, and if that is the most comfortable approach, I would say close the hearing, or, well, you could even leave it open until the next meeting, and I could prepare some type of a motion and some type of a draft. You could also pump up the requirements so that you needed 150 acres or 200 acres. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Some just so that you're not going to have anything come in under the SDZ. If that's what you want to do, that would be the fastest. The moratorium is going to be 60 days before it's in effect, with notice to CROG, public hearing, published and effective. And again, that would just be the SDZ. So to Jim's point about the definitions of warehouses, those are not within the SDZ, those are within Article 5.
That's kind of almost a separate.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not, the definition isn't necessarily changing what applications are going to walk through the door, but it's not within the bounds of 12.15. Am I making any sense, or?
You are.
You are, we're trying to prevent any things from coming in right now that we're unprepared for. I'm just thinking of, oh, shoot, something comes in, this is open, we have to go through those other procedures and we're in that.
Can I ask us a procedural question too? If you close the public hearing and decide to strike 12:15, the SDZ, you can't continue the discussion about warehouse or development about warehouse through this application, correct? You'd have to make a decision on.
We can put it on the agenda anytime, right? We can
Yeah, I
always
mean, you can
discuss
have your own,
definitions.
you can bring your own
Well, we could
thing forward, but it won't, you
can
won't have
ask-
an open application ahead of you. You'd have to create your
Make a
own.
motion to put warehouse definitions on the agenda for November, I think.
Right.
And if I get a second, we're good. If it's approved.
So right, and so that's what I was getting at before about not wanting to create concern that.
Right.
So what we could do is, if that's, if you tell me what you are comfortable with, we can set it up and we can include in findings or whatever that you're going to do the following, or you can have a discussion about what you're going to do immediately after, so that there's no concern that, well, you're going to take this application, do whatever with it, and then nothing will happen, that we never, no step 2.
Right, no step two. John, you brought up a good point. With Mr. Marshall's application with the blanks, would we be able to approve it as written? Because probably not. I think that's true. That's pretty true. Mr. Marshall, do we believe to fill those blanks in based on what you feel? I mean, it's your application.
I would be able to, I would be more than willing to take a stab at it. I would, potentially ask Mike for his input and recommendations between now, if he's willing to have that meeting.
Yeah.
For his knowledge and experience.
Well, I mean, I think we're all on the same page where we want to tune the 12:15 to best suit the town based on our first test by fire. And however,
with it.
and now we need to do it properly and procedurally. So I'm not sure that it matters. What I think your application, your opinions, I could tell you're very knowledgeable about this and you're very passionate about it. I'd say fill in the blanks and then we'll make our decision on that application.
I will work to get that done.
All right,
Now,
that's, I mean, is anyone, am I overstepping? Does
No,
anyone
no,
disagree with any of that?
I think then at that point, I'm hearing that we should leave this hearing open until.
Yeah,
our next meeting.
absolutely, absolutely.
No, it's a road.
Mike, our
we
next
wanna
meeting
go
is
down.
that November?
It's a
8th?
road we want to go down.
And
We're all
again,
for it.
I appreciate the insight. So, it's, getting an understanding of what the folks are comfortable with, I can propose something and I don't want to just work out because, the whole,
Thank you.
I'd like your buy-in, honestly,
I think, yeah,
that'd be great.
you certainly, brought up some excellent points and I don't think anyone's arguing with that. I'm
I
certainly.
have that.
So do we have a motion to leave PZ 22-13 open?
So moved.
Well,
Second.
we have some more questions.
Oh,
Somebody.
Motion's been made, so I'm shut out.
All right.
phew.
Thanks, Bob.
So can I just want to I want to make sure that we're all following people
Okay,
here.
right.
And the one thing that I think the commission really needs to make a decision on, because we've had public have mentioned, and I think there's merit to it
Right.
myself, is the proactive process, because through the application that's on the agenda right now, you cannot leave the proactive process. You can add all the other blanks and you can workshop those. But if the commission feels that the proactive process should remain, you can't do that through modifying,
Mr. Marshall, right, I got that.
which is what I was getting at before. So that I think is a decision before we go and continue the hearing and try to do all these other things. And I'll meet with him and we'll research and do as much as we can.
Good
We
point.
have to figure out what you guys feel on that, because we're not going to be able to come up with an alternative to that one piece.
So,
Just as
so I have something to say about the proactive thing, and I have to agree with the gentleman there. I believe that the proactive is important to give us two opportunities to address any development and say, and the first opportunity has less legal implications than just having one at the end where after there's been 75% more development and then saying no. It's, I think all of this that's been presented can work in unison with the proactive approach, as long as it's massaged enough so it works in our favor. And it's something that will work in our favor.
As a procedural point, would it be making it more restricted if you added another level of review in the traditional process instead of having a whole separate, maybe that didn't have any bite to it, but at least had the ability for the commission to. What if there was a informal 30% review roped into the, that didn't have a zone change application, but at least had a public record component? Would that be making this more restrictive and comply with it?
I mean, I guess I'd have to look to see how it would.
I
It would look on
I'm against the
paper.
proactive
We-
application process, but I just don't think it serves the town well. I don't think it offers protections to the residents. But
I think the proactive process just did serve the town well.
I think we were fortunate to have this commission and your opinions on this commission in this particular instance. I don't think that's necessarily always going to be the case, and I don't think you're going to get a developer that's always the case that isn't going to blow smoke. Honestly, as this guy tried to do, in my personal opinion, no fault to them, but they're doing their job. But it's again, it's subject. It becomes subject to the whims of the current commission. It doesn't protect the town from changeover, from somebody having a bad day, from it's loose. And you guys would be doing your job, but that's my concern with it. Part of it.
And the idea of the proactive was to allow a business owner to not have to invest so much in the upfront cost to determine if a business was even viable. I mean, the regulations can be complex. We've always encouraged pre-application meetings, but those are very loose with very little information, just really a concept. I want to open up a restaurant. Yeah, all right. It's zoned for that, and that's how, get some sketchy stuff. When it gets I found it interesting when it was mentioned that you're right. I mean, 30% for a barber shop is fine. 30% for a warehouse probably isn't. And yet we don't have any, it's either one or the other, the way it's written right now. I'd say for many small businesses, being able to put a small, small operation in an area that's now R80 would be, it seemed like a useful tool. When I first saw this, I thought, oh, okay, that gives a zoning, the zoning commission some leverage. It gives them some leeway and able to be creative. Because again, even within our proposed designed commercial zones, right now they're R80s. There's a lot of R80 properties, even in the areas we've targeted as commercial development. They're not commercial yet. It has to be a zone change. It just, that's the way it is.
Well, this was pitched with the Dollar General, the experience of Dollar General, and that person came forward and he wasn't sure of the final business that was gonna go in there.
And I do remember, yeah. I kind of forgot.
So it was like, well, if we can make it more conducive to those type of developers to come in and he's not quite exactly sure, this gives him some flexibility.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah.
But
Just if I could give one of the other key points that's different, the traditional process is heavy in design up front, but at the end, no public hearing. It is a site plan. You get your design, you go through the process, you land your zone, no public hearing. The proactive process requires the extra public hearing up front because we're not getting the heavy design. So the process is the same. It's just when you go through the steps.
Right.
In thinking about this, and as was illustrated, yes, this regulation mirrors East Windsor. It was written at almost the same time because, as this commission is aware, Willington and East Windsor, work in both towns, were finalists for a state data center project. That was the point that got the SDC started. The proactive process was thrown in after discussions with the EDC. No conspiracy, just the property that they've been working on before I even showed up to town. So I was sitting in a meeting with the developer in East Windsor a week or two ago. We went through the SDZ process with them and they chose the traditional. They said, oh, that makes complete sense to us. We want to get our risk out of the way as soon as possible. So we'll do all that up front and then we'll come in at the end with a site plan. Once we have our tenant, we've got our design plans, there's no public hearing. I don't have to hear from the public, there's no risk. And for that owner, that was the most important. Somebody else that may be footing the bill in a different way does the design at a 30% level. And as I think about this, if we're going to go through this EDC, PZC planning process, I would suggest we move away from percentages altogether because we could all argue till we're blue in the face about what's 60% and what's 80. But the idea is, why spend the money to do a design when you don't know if the town even wants it? And once they do, they're not going to want to change it to the same degree. When the project is at a 30%, they're very open to a lot of that stuff. And I think you can credit the developer for 2210, that a lot of the stuff that was brought up about green infrastructure and other things that, of course, that's what everybody will say, but they can be more flexible to those conditions because they haven't designed the whole building. I'm not saying 30% is the answer, but the proactive process was designed to get the commission at the table formally earlier. I don't know if that's helpful, but I think I can try to pull some of this stuff together. If you want to keep the hearing open, I can try to put down on paper what this might look like, what this workshop planning process might look like, what a red line to get rid of the SDZ effectively would amount to. If you feel like you need something tangible, I can try to do some of that. Or you can, tell me what you want.
We do have a motion that's been seconded, but we may as well hear from Mr. Tulis since we've heard from everybody else.
I want to respond to something Andy said about the data center, 4 stories.
Yeah.
1 million square feet over 4 stories, okay?
Just throwing it up.
But remember one thing, this is a planning and zoning commission. Right now, you're talking planning.
Yes, you're
And
exactly right.
my
My
point,
planning hat.
my point on any development is it's not what they apply for as much as it is what it can be down the road. You best be looking beyond your tenure, beyond your
I
lifetime,
know.
because once the building is built, it's going to be used. It may start out as a data center,
That's right.
but in 20 years, that data center might be no longer needed, and somebody's gonna do an apartment conversion. I
You're
suppose
absolutely
they're
right.
gonna love if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, but that's true of every decision for on every piece of property. in
No,
town.
but what I was responding to, Andy, was the point that what's the harm in that? You know, that's a beautiful thing, data center, doesn't put much of a burden on the town at all. And you're absolutely correct, as a data center.
Right.
But it's what it could be later.
I know.
That's the scary part.
Same would apply to a church.
Yeah. could apply to
Same would
anything.
apply to anything.
Yes, it does.
So,
But as the intensity or as the size increases, the permutations in the future become more dangerous. That's my point.
That's why water use.
that's what I want. I think focusing on water and sewer is the way to go.
Okay.
Because then we pretty much keep it where it should be.
I'd like to bring us
We
back to our
digress.
vote.
I think we should.
We have a motion that's been seconded. All in favor? Aye. Joe,
Refresh me, what was that motion? Did we just
any opposed?
Continue the public hearing.
Any abstentions? Motion carries. Jim, thank you so much for your input.
Thank you very much for your feedback, guys. I appreciate it. Again, very much.
Moving on. Item 5 on the agenda, PZ 22-11, special permit application for the expansion of home occupation to add propane delivery at 163 Ruby Road. I understand we have something to hand out, Mike.
So based upon Walter's comments last night, I basically developed a list of the things that we discussed. Just for your review, these are conditions, potential conditions for consideration with some blanks. And go through them out loud, see the applicant is here. Just so that we can, if you have any questions, you can, I'll explain how we got there, and if there's questions, you can stop me. Does that work?
Sure.
So condition 1, any parking of commercial vehicles.
That's right there. Are we making this now a special permit? We're
That's
taking
what it
this out
is.
of the certificate part.
So this is for, yeah, it's a
So
little
this is
tricky.
almost a new, this is just for propane
This is for the propane, correct?
and has nothing to do with the existing.
Correct.
Okay, that's.
So any parking of commercial vehicles beyond the requested 2 propane delivery trucks and 1 box truck shall be prohibited. So again, this is preventing additional fleet vehicles from expanding. If they wanted to do that, they'd have to come back to modify the conditions of the permit.
Mike, I have a question. Does that mean the existing property trucks that are on the property for septic or the
No,
septic trucks can't park at the same time?
No, so this is just for the propane. So he's requested 2 propane, 1 box truck with the special permit. So it's limiting him to exactly that. We can't really impact the septic stuff. That's a separate permit that was issued many years ago.
That's what I was.
So prior to any parking or storage of the subject vehicles, a solid fence and or gate not less than 6 feet in height shall be installed north of the detached garage and parallel to Ruby Road, a distance of at least 50 linear feet. I think that's what it would take to basically block and screen that entire area from view of the road. You could move that number. Notwithstanding the installation of the required fence and gate, the existing vegetation and tree line north of the detached garage shall be maintained for a distance of not less than 100 feet. So what that means is we're going to have, I'm asking for 50 feet of fence, and then there's a portion where the property continues, and I want that vegetation to be maintained. I don't think the applicant should have to run a fence through the total frontage of the property. That's a little excessive, and it gets thicker as you move in that direction. So the thought would just be to maintain that vegetated buffer beyond the 50 feet and not remove any additional buffer or any additional evergreens or whatever beyond what they need to install the fence. 163 Ruby Road and 187 Ruby Road are to remain in the ownership of the permittee. There were some concerns and discussion about all these vehicles being stored in a non-visible part of the property. And so what happens if the parcels, because they are separate, are sold or whatever, they can be sold, they could be sold separately. So rather than say they've got to be merged, because again, we don't see the property lines, we're gonna just require that they be kept in common ownership. Special permits run with the land, so a new owner would be subject to the same criteria. The existing parking area to the northwest of the detached garage shall not be expanded to accommodate additional business vehicles. So right now, per the plan, he's got parking for 3. He's gonna have parking for 3. He's not gonna continue to allow more to be parked out front. So even though you're allowing more vehicles on site, there's no change to the net vehicles stored by the road. There shall be no overnight parking or storage of business vehicles or equipment within the existing driveway area. So there's a distinction here, parking or storage overnight. So if the property owner comes home to have lunch or to do something quickly, the vehicle can be there, but overnight parking or storage, the vehicle should not remain basically between the garage and the road. 7, the 2 permitted propane delivery trucks shall only be parked on site overnight if empty. So again, when they come back at the end of the day, they're empty. If you stop by, pick up some paperwork or to pick up an employee or whatever, that's fine. You're going to be there for a very short period of time, but once they return home at night, they need to be empty. And then no propane storage or distribution from this property is permitted. That was not part of his application, but we have that section of the regs that talks about propane distribution under the ZBA. So just make it very clear, again, they run with the land. I think that these are all things that the applicant represented. I don't think there's anything here that we're asking to do that wasn't already more or less agreed to, but that's what I came up with.
During the public hearing, I seem to remember correctly where I'm wrong. About the property addresses and the actual property where the is there, and I think we learned, I'm sure I learned that all the property is jointly owned, so it isn't sort of, the boundaries are irrelevant almost. But was there a restriction? We're not putting any restriction. Well, I thought I heard the applicant say that he would be willing to expand his parking area. Like he would just open up an area, but it was on the other address. Is that right?
There's, I believe that there's 11 acres zoned as forest land.
Oh, right, and he would have been willing to carve out, take some of that out of 490.
It's
and
taxed as forest land.
Right.
So it's.
And I looked at
still
that, and it
operating.
says that 490 can't be used. If it's under 490, it can't be used for anything. But if you take it out of 490, it can be. So we should be able to. And I think the applicant said, I believe he said out loud, oh, I'll just switch it, I'll change it. If that was the case.
Well, I asked him about.
You asked him about that, okay, right. And so if that was the case, that would, if that was done, wouldn't that alleviate some of that visible parking problem that was one of the complaints? Or one of the issues?
The 490 stuff is really just a designation for tax purposes. It's not at all bound or tied in any way to this realm. So,
But I mean, it was brought up in the public hearing, and it's a sort of an ethical thing that if you're gonna, if we say you need to expand it, then the assumption would be it comes out of 490, I guess is what I'm saying.
yeah, so this is preventing him from doing any of that. He can't, there will be no material expansion of any parking areas. The only thing that you're gonna see new is a fence. He's not gonna be allowed to expand that parking area beyond what he has now. And if there's if it's in forest, that's a sort of a state-run program. There's farm forest and open space. Towns have control over open space.
Right.
Forest is the state. That could go away. The state could change it tomorrow. Because it's not a land use thing, I don't want to rely upon what it says because we don't have control over it staying or going. If there's an issue with the use of the property related to PA 490, that's between him and the assessor.
But since we reference both addresses within this draft motion.
Yep.
Doesn't that sort of imply that both of those properties are available for use?
No, I wouldn't say so because he he
Why is it
represented a very
important that they remain in the, if they're not relevant, then why do we say they have to remain in the property?
because the back portion of the property of the 187 is where the sort of non-visible components are stored currently,
So
and where they would be stored based upon what's proposed. So the concern was if he divests himself of one of the properties where he's currently storing these things, now he doesn't have that offsite, non-visible location. Or part that's not up by the road. You can strike that condition if you have.
No,
a
no, no,
problem,
no,
you
I
know?
just wanted to think if the applicant wanted to make it less visible from the road by expanding his footprint, why would we be opposed to that?
We wouldn't,
Okay,
as long as he owns both properties.
yeah, that's what I'm
And
saying,
he
that's all
wants
I was,
to-
that's all I was trying to get to.
Sure.
The fact
Sorry.
that we're saying he owns both properties,
Mhm.
then if he chooses to do that, his tax deal's his deal.
Mhm.
And then we wouldn't, there's nothing in that would prevent him from making his operation less visible from the road by you expanding his area to the rear.
Correct. Yes, sorry.
That's all right, I wasn't.
So then should we strike item 5 here? Where it's disallowing it to expand.
Right,
That's just the portion of the property where the vehicles are parked right behind the garage. So we're saying the area that is visible currently prior to
May
the
not be
fence being
expanded.
installed.
Okay.
So if he has, and that's just again limiting that total scope of where it exists.
okay, so the existing, there's nothing to prevent him from making another storage area. Okay,
That wasn't visible.
that isn't, yeah, right. You wouldn't even know.
Number 7. Is that overly restricted or should it be no intentional storage of propane overnight? I mean, is it? There may be situations where you get a load of propane and the next day it's storming out. So he's gonna store propane, right? Is the plan, it's gonna be on his property? Or if it comes back and he's got, 100 gallons left. If possible to enforce. Is it more,
It's, yes, complicated to enforce potentially. The key there is essentially protection based upon what was discussed. The idea is that if there is a way to enforce it, and regardless, and I can't remember now if you mentioned it during public hearing or when we were on site or what have you, but there are beneficial reasons for his use of the trucks for those tanks to be empty. Particularly in the cold months, he stated that the valves and the way the trucks are, it's cold, you can leave them open and if the truck is empty and then they won't freeze, which makes it easier to use when you go fill it up.
okay,
Because propane condensates, I think some of that stuff could freeze and that would make it harder to use in the cold weather months, which is when you use the propane trucks. So by having them empty, tank can be left open and it'll be ambient. This is what he explained to us. And I think that there was concern about distribution and storage and the safety related to having these trucks on the property. So that's where it comes from. But
Yeah, I think it might also come down to liability. If, say, a propane truck was to blow up on the property and injure somebody, and it was found to be, 200 gallons of propane in it, then, it was in violation. So that would probably come down to an issue of liability.
we could refine the word empty if you were worried that there would be some, leftovers or whatever, just little trace amounts,
Well, certainly there's going to be trace amounts. I think.
So,
if it's essentially empty all the time, then it's fine. I just, ask a question.
Yeah.
I think it's one thing to have intentionally storing the material overnight. By some chance, there could be some left over, a small amount in the tanks, but if it's never gonna happen, then
I don't know the industry well enough to know if something like shall not contain more than 5 gallons, or, could you do something there so that someone says, well, hold on, don't think they're empty and we're running down there. Like, there's obviously no way that But we can, I imagine that the trucks have some mechanism. I mean, he's gonna have reports or some log of when he's picking this stuff up, and he doesn't just say fill it up and not know how much he's accepted. So I would imagine, sort of like the bills of lading, you kind of know what's coming in and going out.
Mhm.
And he should be able to demonstrate if there was a concern, that he accepted this many gallons at this date and dispersed this many gallons throughout the day or whatever. But if you want to tweak that, I mean, we certainly could.
Any other commissioners have anything to say? Okay, I'll open it to the public. Any member of the public wish to speak?
Oh, no, the public hearing closed.
Oh, public hearing is closed, sorry.
Just deliberation on the decision.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve PZ 22-11 special permit application for expansion of home occupation to add propane delivery at 163 Ruby Road, applicant owner David Litwin. Do the motion.
Does the special permit for the propane operation impact the certificate for the septic operation? Is there any conflict there? We have two separate overlying things here. It seems weird. Is it weird?
Well, it's strange in that the way it was originally approved,
Right.
Susan's interpretation of the regs were basically, if she couldn't view signage from the road, then that was about all she, and so the regs envision an approval that originally came to the commission for something like that. I thought when I was writing this, how can we tie together what is going on with the existing property and the existing use?
Okay, I think you
I
did a
don't-
good job with that.
I don't know that we could. Because that use is separate and distinct, and it's a separate permit, which means if you deny this application, that permit doesn't die. Just like that permit is subject to enforcement and subject to modification.
Just.
It is awkward, and I would have loved to have been able to tie them all together
Yeah.
for just the sake of understanding the totality of the operation on the site.
Yeah.
But I can't.
I think you, for the most part, I think the concerns that were brought up about the current business seem to be addressed within this draft motion, within this motion.
Well, and you consider this just on itself.
Yes, I think we do, yes.
It is, it's the two trucks and the service, the box truck. And that's all we're talking about.
That's all we're talking about, that's right.
Because this is only about the propane business.
You're right, no, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I suppose they would come back empty, because you fill them up, you empty it all up. We all do our deliveries.
Well, I have propane,
Yeah,
right?
Right.
So when the guy comes, he doesn't know how much I got in my tank.
yeah, right, no, you never know how much you're gonna deliver.
So he fills it up to 80%.
Yeah, and he goes away.
Gives me the bill, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how they calculate that. In the beginning, they just know roughly.
Well, they pump so many gallons out.
Yeah.
And that's it.
So, like, so if he goes out and everybody's just getting 5 gallons, and he's going back with somebody's truck.
Yeah.
If everybody gets 100 gallons or 200, then he's gonna be going back for more in midday. What do they hold? They hold about 2,700 gallons. The fire department feel about propane. What do they do? Don't they dedicate a 2-inch hose to a propane tank, something like that?
That's 6 people.
What?
That's 6 people and a lot of hose.
6 people and a lot of hose for every propane tank.
And there's 5.
Yeah, right.
There's that.
seemed like most of the concern was as far as was screening the trucks from public view. So I think that's been taken care of.
I think that's been addressed in here. Yeah.
Mike, can you put the property up on the screen? Is it possible to Google map it?
1 second.
I thought we had done it a while because of COVID. When I think I'm on definitely practicing how it worked, but sidewalks. We used to do a lot more sidewalks back in the day, and I think that so much of the land not being applied for use, I think that we should probably start trying to resurrect those. They are public hearings. The public can't talk, neither do we, but they are open to the public. Just no speaking. I remember right. I think I'd like just to think about that, to start, we need to start getting out and really observing these properties and not just seeing on paper and stuff. You get,
Well, they're three-dimensional.
yeah, right, they're three-dimensional. We need to get out there and look at those. And
I did a drive-by on this site.
Yeah.
Because I live right down the street.
Good.
And I think that the fencing plan that's in here is adequate.
I'm sure it is. They've always been beneficial to me, the sidewalks, just to walk around and see what you're doing. So that what you saw, John, pretty much?
Yep.
Was there snow on the ground?
No,
This is December of 21. according to
Well, they had
Google.
30 inches up in. It got some big snow up there in the upper Midwest.
So the property line, based upon the stakes that are out there, is behind the wall.
Okay,
behind that rock wall.
behind the stone, all right.
So this is the detached garage that is.
Okay, and that's what we would see today. So it's pretty not much is hidden. You can see right in.
Right, so the idea would be from this point, parallel to Ruby Road, you have 50 feet of fence. Solid fence, 6 feet in height. The road sits slightly lower than the property, so you get a little bit of extra height
Okay.
from there. Over 6 feet, need a building permit, and it's much more complicated.
Sure.
And then as you move a little bit further down the road.
That doesn't create a blind driveway out of his driveway, does it?
It should be far enough back because it'd be behind that tree that they're gonna have. That's a substantial right away.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
So then the idea would be for, in this area, an additional 50 feet. We just don't want that to be cleared.
Right.
No
Just
additional.
leave the trees alone.
Right.
So Mike, is it possible to have that fence installed on his wood road that runs parallel to Ruby Road as opposed to having that fence come out to the stone wall right next to the road?
Yeah, I think that could be an option.
I think that would
The only thing,
take the fence away from the road.
And you see the woods road.
Well, he's got a woods road that runs, see where that white area is? That's an open field. And in
Yeah.
front of that open field, there's a dirt road that runs all the way up parallel to Ruby Road, up to the old barn across from where the house burned.
Okay.
So that connects all those properties.
All right.
So if the fence was put on the side of that, on the edge of that wood road,
It would
closest
do
to
the
Ruby
screening.
Road to do the screening, it would give like 50 feet or well,
A
say
buffer.
30 feet or so.
Yeah.
Clear view down.
So you're not blocking so many
Ruby Road.
sightlines for
That's
the
right. So
drivers,
it's not right
but you're still
there.
screening the
That's
operation.
right, right.
True. Well, we don't specify the placements. You just say parallel to Ruby
Well,
Road.
maybe we should
Mhm.
specify so that it doesn't create an issue, quote unquote,
Right.
near to the Ruby Road.
so if you come into the driveway and the garage is to your left and the road kind of hooks around like this, and and this is where the vehicles are, there is an automatic standby generator on the right side of that road. So I don't know if that would create issues because I think it's propane and the fence would basically have to run on that side.
Jog around and maybe something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, could it be set, maybe off that Woods Road a little bit, but, I think keeping it away from Ruby Road would be a positive thing. And if it's set further back from Ruby Road, as you're going up Ruby Road, it gives you further screening, really.
Right. The farther back it goes, it should create somewhat of an increased coverage. I just don't know. I mean, based upon the site plan, he's got 1 or 2 parking spaces there, employee parking space, got the propane generators. I don't remember if there was enough space. I'm trying to figure out how to verify that now. You can't have new information because the hearing is closed. We could certainly evaluate the appropriateness of that condition and try to adjust it. But it would have to be staff going out onto the property and determining if that would be more or less and just changing the condition. I could write something and you could make the decision, but I can't.
My thought is that if you go next to the stone wall, you're gonna have to go through some kind of brush there. And it doesn't seem like there's that much stuff growing there. There's a few pine trees and small pine trees and such, that if you're going, stepping off of that Woods Road that he has there into the wooded area, there wouldn't be any more work putting it there than next to the stone wall. Having
Actually,
it
might be easier if
having-
you think about it and, traveling that road all the time. I agree that stepping it off increases your sight line. And when you're driving a 30-foot truck down that road and another 53-foot comes at you, it can get a little hairy right in there. That extra room is probably better for everybody driving.
Yeah. Well, we certainly could say it has to be no less than X number of feet from the existing stone wall. Right, that would be, that would not be new information because the site plan was submitted. So we can physically see the existing stone wall, so I don't know my compass directions based on basically east, I guess. But it has to be at least 50 feet, 30 feet, pick a number east of the stone wall.
Well, it's Ruby Road runs what, north, south?
No, north, south.
So it's west.
Oh, west, yeah, sorry, west. Thank you.
I was up when the sun was up.
I was going the wrong way on Ruby Road. Looking at snow.
So should we change?
I don't know, what do you think? I mean, that would, I think that makes, Bob brings up a good point about sight lines and, but we don't know where that generator is, but I don't know.
We have time to make the discussion that Mike could go out and look at that and see if this location is feasible for that fence and makes sense.
You have time, yeah,
How about at least 20 feet west of the stone wall? Parallel to the stone wall, but 20 feet west of the stone wall.
I think to keep it compliant and keep the public hearing process protected, the best we could do is you ask staff to draft a potential alternate condition. We would show up to the next meeting with an alternate condition to swap out based upon what in our interpretation is appropriate. And you could modify it from there, but I couldn't go out and say, so I saw this and we talked about that. And you'd have to just take that and say yes, no, or modify it. That's about the best we can do.
So we ask staff to
Yeah, I think we should.
modify that particular.
Yeah.
Do we have to say that particular condition?
No, we have to.
We have to need a motion, right? Don't we need a motion to change the condition?
Well, you don't have to, this is just suggested, so you don't have to take any action on it.
This is data.
So you, I don't think there's a motion on the floor.
There's not.
No second, so,
No second.
so we will propose an alternate condition for your consideration for the next meeting. And you have time on the agenda, you've got plenty of time, so there's no issues with timing or timeframes for deadlines. So we will draft up something and you'll have a comparison you can make at the next meeting.
When's our next meeting?
November 1st.
It's too soon.
Too soon.
Two
No,
weeks.
it's the first, I think. you talked about.
Yeah.
First. Is there any other conditions other than that one which you feel? You want me to try to take a stab at this empty discussion? Are we comfortable with the term empty?
I'm just asking if it's like impossible to enforce, you know?
I think it is.
But I
What
wonder,
are you gonna do? I mean, if you go out and try to deliver all day, you don't, what are you gonna do? Say,
but
"Oh,
it could be like.
drive the truck around all
oil
night because I can't park."
Your oil company has X number of people who've called and said, they have an estimate of how much.
Right.
You're gonna already know how much you're filling for it. I don't think it's going to be that a full truck.
Yeah.
You're not gonna go pick up propane when you have no deliveries that day, or only one or two. You might move them to bulk to fill that truck.
Yeah, I don't understand that part of the business.
I
don't
would
know.
think it would be like an oil delivery where they call up and say, hey, I need
X gallons.
X number of gallons. Well, I need to fill my tank. Okay, well, how much do you have? Well, I have half. There's gauges. There should be a gauge on the tank. Estimate.
Oh,
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're moving on from PZ 22-13 then. Any other discussion?
No, I just have to keep it on next agenda.
Is that 13 or 11?
Oh, sorry.
We don't say postpone, what do we say? We continue, that's the word.
Okay. Okay, then on to item 2 of unfinished business. That was the special permit for cannabis retail. But tonight already, there's nothing to do here, correct?
Right, so open, hearing open.
Same with PC 22-13, keeping the hearing open.
Right, yeah.
And PC 22-14, we want to have no discussion on that, postponed to 11-1. Item G, approval of minutes from our meeting. October 4th, was that our last meeting? Yes. I would move that we accept the meeting minutes as written. Does anybody have any updates or changes they'd like to make to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll move that we approve the meeting minutes as written.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'd like to abstain as I left the meeting room.
Okay. So we had 5 votes in favor, 1 abstention. Item H, public participation for items not on the agenda. Any member of the public wish to speak? Yes, please.
Maureen Loach, 41 Cosgrove Road. I posed a question at our last meeting and I asked, when does a home occupation outgrow itself and become considered as a commercial business? And I did not get a proper answer. I got to kind of skirt around and it wasn't answered. So my question to the commissions is, when does a home occupation outgrow itself as a home occupation and be considered as a commercial business?
I don't know that there's any hard and fast rules around that. Mike, do you have any suggestions there?
Right, no, many of the special Many of the home occupations are by special permit, which are inherently case by case basis. So the type of property, the size, the extent, there's a lot of factors related to it. It's not an administrative yes, no, which is why it's a special permit. We don't have very clear defined guidelines for that.
How about home occupations that are not under a special permit? They're home occupations, which reads 11-01-01-04 reads that a home occupation consists of the primary dwelling. So the home occupation shall occupy an area and the principal dwelling, principal meaning your primary, not subsequent, not additional lots. So your principal dwelling for 1104, or any accessory building which is equal to no more than 25% of the livable floor area of the, again, principal dwelling, not additional lots.
I think that the business is located in the principal dwelling. If I'm not mistaken, David, you must keep an office. His business is located in his principal dwelling.
But we're discussing the vehicles being parked on the subsequent, it doesn't matter.
Point of order here. We're talking about something on the agenda, we're not?
No, we're not talking about on the agenda. I'm asking a subsequent, I'm asking a general question. If the agenda is closed, my question is, when go into a supplemental as an address, is your primary dwelling, when does it go?
Okay, that's been answered in that we don't have a hard and fast rule. There just isn't.
Although the
They're assessed on
regulation says primary dwelling.
They are assessed on a case by case basis, and there is no hard and fast rule.
Okay, that still didn't answer my question. But thank you to the commission.
Yes, Todd.
I'd like to share a situation, two of them actually, that comes from the property I own, which is 41. I reside at it. And I also bought 45 with more in here. Well, Thompson at 41 Cosgrove Road. And I purchased the property from a couple that were selling it. And at the time, they put up a horse barn. And it's by regulation, you can't have a horse barn with 100 feet of the property line. And all of the zoning people went out. He was required to do a survey. He had to be certified. They all walked the property. I commend where a board would go out in a hypothetical situation to view what you're looking at. Because when they viewed the barn, they said how long the barn was, and it had to be protected from the neighbor's house. So the barn was, say, 60 feet long, a 50 feet fence doesn't cover it, hypothetically. When you put two of them together in a row. And the house that I bought next door was by Clyde Hall, God rest his soul, he passed away. I purchased the house through him, and he had chickens. And they wanted to put chickens there, and the commission came out and said, no, you can't have them this close to the border. He in turn had also put it 800 feet at the end of the property, 100 feet away from everybody, same as my barn. So in theory, it's nice what you guys do. You protect. I would encourage, as they did with the house I purchased, I would have loved to have the barn way up close to me. I gotta walk 800 feet to it. I would have loved to have that barn closer, but it wasn't convenient, but it was against the regs. And when you guys look at something and view it, I commend you, what you're doing. It's nice that the commission went out there with my situation and they made the people push it farther back. Clyde had to put his farm farther back. He had to walk 800 feet too. He wasn't happy with it, but those were the rules. In theory, what I'm trying to get across is, in this hypothetical situation, take a peek, take a look at how long things are, look at how buildings are, look how long certain things are, what can hide it. That's all. You know, it's about property. And the same thing where you're speaking hypothetically, my lot goes back, I think it's like 1,200 feet, which is, they said, put it back, out of sight. Hypothetically, other situations can be cured very simply, put it back farther, put it back. It's a very simple situation, and you guys have already touched on it. Thank you.
Ralph.
Ralph Tillis, 47 Willisville Road. Looking at Phelps Plaza. memory serves me correct, requirement is the signage to be uniform throughout the plaza. Basic configuration of the sign. I would suggest you take a gander at some of the signs, particularly one near the post office, and that is way out of character for the plaza. And keep that in mind with a future application at that same location.
Thank you,
My
Ron.
only comment.
Okay. Any more public participation? Hearing none, we'll move on to correspondence. Mike, any new correspondence?
Additional correspondence.
Okay, staff report and discussion. The up for review and consideration is the temporary moratorium, section 12.15 strategic development zone.
So you guys should have a copy of the sort of working entitled staff report. So in short, looking at the time, moratoria are handled administratively in the same fashion as a text amendment. They must be submitted and reviewed, and as we talked about, there has to be a rational connection between what the moratorium is for, why you are adopting it, and how long. So you have to just make sure that if you're adopting it to protect against something happening for a period of time, that there's a rationale between how. When we did cannabis, it was, we want to have the time to adopt cannabis regulations without having to treat them like a similar use. So I took a whack at essentially coming up with a defensible purpose statement related to that. And so if you read through an explanation of the SDZ, which is the first paragraph, it then says, following the completion of the commission's review of the first application submitted under the newly adopted SDZ, the commission would like to undertake an internal review of the regulation to ensure that the regulation contains the intended incentives, but also the necessary control. So that would be the purpose of the process. The moratorium would apply to the entire 12.15. It would effectively cut and replace for that period of time for all intents and purposes. And I've written it here that it will exist for a period of 6 months or until such time as you adopt modifications. So if you adopt something after 3, they immediately replace and you run with that. Answer any questions? Well, or things you think that were missed and should be included.
If we adopt a moratorium
Mhm.
on 12.15, let's say we did that November 1st. That puts a stop to the use of that zone. We could then deliberate on applications we have relating to that pretty free. Yes, no?
You couldn't, I mean,
If we
November
got
But
1st,
we have to
Yeah.
deliberate on the application before us.
right, the only issue is the November 1st timeline is too quick. 'Cause we'd
Well,
have
that's
to-
all right. I just threw a date out there, a date in the
More
future.
like December 5th.
Okay, December 5th, we put, if there's a moratorium and we
If-
put the brakes on it.
If we adopt a moratorium on December 5th, but we get an application in between today and December 5th, that application would come in under the SBZ as written.
Which is gonna happen no matter what.
We
So
would
that-
have to consider that application.
Yeah, and so that, yes, we would.
Also, just for the record, the SDZ requires they meet with staff as the first step in submitting under the SDZ. We have had no meetings, no calls, no nothing. I'm not saying that we won't tomorrow, but nothing today. It's not like there's some secret project in the hopper.
So just curious, I mean, just. I don't know, just thinking about. Marshall application. That if we elect to do the moratorium. That kind of. Frees us up, I think, procedurally. From. I don't know, making any mistakes by what we do with the Marshall.
The only caveat is the way that you wouldn't have to just figure out what the effective date is, because once you adopted a change under 13, it would replace the moratorium. Because this is a moratorium to allow you to adopt regs. You have 6 months to do it. If you adopt something in a month, so there's a bit of a chicken and the egg.
Wait, we have 6 months.
Or until such time as you adopt regs, whichever is sooner.
Right, we have no more than 6 months.
We could
do 8
extend,
months. We could do 8 months.
you could do 8 months, yep.
It's just hard to, get to these decisions sometimes. It takes a while.
It's, yeah, there's a lot of complex things that are also.
There is, and, yeah.
Well, how long did it take for the open space?
Oh, geez. Right, we even did a crash test application for that one. We had somebody submit one.
And we could do that. I mean, we have a
It's
consultant
worthwhile.
town engineer. We could certainly run them through. If we chose some type of a project, we could have them run it through. I could, although I think if we go the other route of workshopping the whole thing and we move away from the percentage discussion, if we didn't, we could try to get examples of plans of that criteria to give you a sense of what 100% plan might look like and what I mean, we could pull some of that if you think it's helpful. We
I don't know, at this point,
that
maybe I
information.
just want to put the brakes on it so we can think about it.
Well, the only thing we need is, approval of the applicant, so that we can keep that open.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that, to me, there's a bit of a conflict between these two things, but maybe that probably just getting wrapped up in the details.
We don't have to approve Mr. Marshall's.
No, we don't.
No, and we're not doing it, we could actually consider everything, once we put the moratorium on it, it's still our information, and we can still work with that, so.
Just since you're considering, I mean, if you approve, or if you rule on my application before the moratorium becomes effective, it doesn't null and void the moratorium, right? Because that's not effective until 15 days after a public hearing and prior approval. You guys probably have a good 2 months to debate the merits of my application. Like, there's not really a concern. You can still probably act on this now. But thank you.
With the end result of the moratorium, be input to another public hearing with a regulation change? Or was that time all have to be done within the time stated within the moratorium?
The moratorium itself would have to have a hearing, and then the planning process of revising the regs would also be a separate text amendment, so there would be a whole public hearing for that. So you'd have to effectively establish new regs.
So the output of the moratorium would be the input for a public hearing for the.
Right, so if you, and if I'm reading you correctly, if there was concern that you couldn't get it all done in 6 months, you could extend it. If you're thinking,
Okay.
we might not get regs written, workshop, public hearing, adopted, and effective in 6 months, you couldn't make it 8 or 9.
Right.
Because again, if you adopt it sooner, it just reverts.
Yeah.
So you could extend it from 6 to.
Okay. And once we do the public hearing for the moratorium, then we can take all the new information.
Well, it would just be
It was
on
just before the moratorium.
Right.
Not the discussion of any change. Okay.
I think that for me, there's two things that I am trying to make sure we don't get into hot water on.
Right.
One, having an application from a private citizen that envisions X and taking the whole thing and moving it around to something completely different and
Right.
5 months down the road, the regulation that's adopted is not at all what was envisioned. Is there going to be a risk here? No, because the public sentiment is that it's in
Right.
support of where we're going, but you have to be careful about what you say you're going to do and then what you ultimately do.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, if any planning process, any workshop, any multi-commission discussion, that's a lot harder to do within the confines of the timeframe that we're going to have.
Right.
Given that we have 5 other applications and another text amendment that we received, but there's other work. You guys have been busy, so I just worry about the timing and not wanting things to be rushed. We can get there multiple ways.
I think we're gonna have to have some special meetings.
We may.
I mean, the
There
good news
was
is special
also-
meetings, when we've had them before, we don't have to be so concerned about a quorum all the time. As long as we have participation and we're moving forward, everybody can fill each other in. They're not, they're public, but they're not open to the public unless, so those have been fairly successful. That even if a couple of people show up, you can still get stuff done. You can still talk about things.
There's
And share it with the
there's
group.
also been talk of moving our meeting time up to 7.
Yeah, there's some talk about
That might
that.
help as well.
So we get them before
Yeah.
Well, I know what we're doing.
I would move that we adopt the moratorium.
I second that.
So we have to read all this language, correct?
You don't need to, because the only thing you're moving right now is to submit it to CROG. Because it's
Right.
got to become a formal application.
Okay.
So if you like the language as written, you should have a discussion about the
Think
time.
of anything better.
Why don't I read it into the record so that we have it on the meeting?
Yeah.
In April of 2022, the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted section 12.15, known as Strategic Development Zone, SDZ. Created as a special development district, the SDZ was written to expand economic development by facilitating focused growth within specific commercial nodes. The framework of the SDZ was established to provide flexibility in allowable uses and site layout. In return for allowing additional flexibility, the commission has afforded greater controls for both site and building design through a multi-step approval process, which requires more information and due diligence be provided than that of a conventional zone change and site development process. Following the completion of the commission's review of the first application submitted under the newly adopted SDZ, the commission would like to undertake an initial review of the regulation to ensure that the regulation contains the intended incentives, but also the necessary controls. Section 1.12.15.2, temporary moratorium. For the reasons set forth above and notwithstanding any other provision of the zoning regulations to the contrary, the Planning and Zoning Commission hereby adopts a temporary and limited moratorium related to section 12.15, known as the Strategic Development Zone. This moratorium shall be in effect for 6 months, following the effective date as established by the commission, or until such time as the commission adopts modifications to section 12.15, whichever occurs earlier.
Mr. Chairman, I think we should give ourselves more than 6 months. I think that from what I'm hearing, we would welcome input from other commissions and possibly even public comment. And I think, I mean, really, think of this, we'll go to effect January 1st, to have it done by June. That's only
Go for 9 months.
12
then.
meetings. I doubt, we could- with all of the other things happening, I would doubt 12 meetings would be sufficient. So could we, I would like to suggest 9 months. And then we maybe make sure we know how to give ourselves an extension if we need it.
Okay, I would be open to doing 9 months as well.
What do you think? Does that sound reasonable?
It does.
Yeah, we can always finish earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah.
Want to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we, did I just do that? Are we good? Or do I have to make a motion?
I think make a motion to change to 9 months.
Sorry, I would like to make a motion that we make the moratorium for 9 months.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. Any abstentions?
We'll change it to 9 months.
Yep.
It will get sent to CROG, and then based upon that, we will schedule that for a hearing. For the, whatever the soonest hearing would be.
Okay, Crog will get care. Think they'll say anything about it? They're pretty good about it.
I'd probably call and say, what, this is the third or fourth text amendment of the same zone in the year.
Get used to
No,
it.
they
Get used
almost
to it.
never call. I don't even.
You ever go to the meetings?
We have,
I'm
John?
supposed to be the representative. They've never contacted me.
yeah, last time when we checked in, they had a new executive director. That's sort of a tragic death of one of their employees a couple of months ago. So I think they're in a bit of a state of flux. But last time we had checked in, they hadn't had one of the meetings, but he's appointed.
Okay.
Town.
Doug would like to say something.
Mike, you mentioned the last meeting that there's a number of statutes that change and our planning and zoning regs need to be like scrubbed from
Yes,
beginning to end.
yes. So,
So we had, I think, Ken Slater's office do this in the past, where they basically they look at our regs and they basically propose all these changes to bring them up to, I think that would be a good use of their time rather than.
Yeah, I think what we could do, I am working on an application that'll go before the ARPA Commission, Town's ARPA Commission, basically asking for funds to go through the E-code codification process, which would bring the town's ordinances, but the zoning regs, subdivision regs, et cetera, to a digital E-code format that a lot of towns use if you've read ordinances and other things. They're accessible on a phone, they track revision dates. It's basically a digital document system. A lot of towns go through the process. We just did it in Ashford, and as part of that, they do a legal review. And I think it would bring the regs to a much more accessible format than this document that we have now, 300 pages or whatever. So if that were to be approved, my thought would be that we would kind of go through and the workshop changes, it would go to Helen and Sage for review. And then if we had the money for the codification, we could then supplement it, would go online, sort of section by section. Yeah, so we would definitely want Helen and Sage to be involved in reviewing that. There's a lot of stuff that should be changed, and there's some confusion in ways that regs have been interpreted previously, like with home occupations. I think we need to boil that down. So that's my plan, and I'd absolutely, yeah, we'd ask Helen to be involved.
Yeah, if we can leverage attorneys to do that, I mean, because I don't think we have the time to do that based on.
Figuring out
these
the time and the
agendas.
budget.
Well, there's plenty of money apparently, so.
Yeah,
from
I don't
what I'm
know.
Reading.
We'll find out, but yeah, they've been pretty responsive, and they reviewed the SDZ, they reviewed cannabis, they reviewed, what was the other one we just did? Strategic, South Willington Village. There's another one. They have done the reviews as we've gone through, so that's definitely part of the process. Like the agenda first a little bit.
Yeah, some good ones.
Okay, this brings us to item K, my favorite, adjournment.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everybody.